Chapter 11:13. The blood letter on the bamboo slip in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. It fell to the ground with a thud, making a dull sound. Half of his body on the ground, the young man's slightly thin shoulders trembled. The audience, who had been sucking up to the young man's good looks, was stunned. Did the streamer bully the young man? Yi Wu Yanling, what's wrong with the young man? He doesn't look like he's smiling, he's clearly crying. Ye Jingjing, pull out the 40-meter-long sword. Who bullied the young man? The 85 troops in the streaming room won't forgive him. To me, streamer, can you ask the young man why he suddenly cried? Zuzi Chuai, the poor thing is crying like that. His heart is broken. Some of the audience comforted him, while others looked for the reason for Qin Gong's sad crying. In ancient times, men were particular about bleeding but not crying. If they were not extremely sad, they would not cry in front of others, let alone a general. They would rather die standing than live kneeling. Crying was sometimes more shameful than living without purpose. Jiang Pengji stood at the door and looked out. She considerately left some space for Qin Gong and some dignity for him. Following the clues, the audience quickly focused their attention on the blood letter left by Su Fei for Qin Gong. Xingyue Tianyun, streamer, you've read the 2 blood letters. What's in the one you left for Qin Gong? Qin Gong was so sad after reading the blood letter that he could not control himself. Who would believe that it was not the blood letter? Jiang Pengji crossed her arms in front of her chest and stood outside the elegant main hall of the provincial government. Wei Ci followed a step behind her. Neither of them spoke. The audience was helpless. They could only work together to find the truth. For a moment, Sherlock Holmes, Edagawa Conan, Robin, and other detectives appeared one after another. The entire streaming room was filled with inferences that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Some of the audience's inferences were very close to the truth, while others had wild imaginations. They were as funny as they could be. After a while, the young man's hoarse and suppressed voice came from the main hall. Magistrate of Liuzhou, Jiang Pengji returned and sat on the seat of honor. I was overwhelmed with emotions and couldn't control myself. I've embarrassed myself in front of Magistrate Liuzhou and Mr. Wei. Qin Gong had already wiped away the tears on his face, but there were still traces of tears on his cheeks. The tip of his nose and cheeks were dyed with an abnormal redness. His eyes were bloodshot, and his temperament was pitiful. It made people's maternal instincts explode. They wanted to rush out of the screen and hug him in their arms to comfort him. Jiang Pengji was still expressionless. If she showed any sympathy or pity, it would be a heavy blow and humiliation to Qin Gong. Have you read your lord's letter? Qin Gong's body stiffened for a moment, and he could only squeeze out 3 words after a long while. Yes, I have. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyes and sighed. Do you know that he has no other choice? The enemy was strong while he was weak, and there was nothing he could do to save himself. Thinking about the past, he felt that he had let down his father and brother. Now, I don't want to implicate you. Without your talent, I don't want the bloodline of the Qin family to end. Qin Gong broke down in an instant. Tears welled up in his eyes and refused to fall. He choked with a sobbing voice and said, I wish I could imitate my father and brothers and willingly fight until the last drop of blood for my lord. Although I am still young, I know the word loyalty and filial piety. Why would I abandon my lord in danger for my future, life, and bloodline? At the end of his sentence, Qin Gong's voice broke, and hot tears streamed down his cheeks. It was like a young beast crying blood, and it made people's hearts tighten. Jiang Pengji and him only had a few sentences in their conversation, but the audience had already imagined the entire plot. Yeguru porridge, cutie, was he abandoned by his lord? Ing Luo, it seems so. His lord knew that he was going to die, so he deliberately asked Cutie to send him away? Chinching gorilla, hee, I bet on the streamer's integrity and shamelessness. This matter is definitely not that simple. You are loyal, and he must know this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entrusted such an important task to you. Qin Gong burst into tears again. The last time he cried was when he was setting up a cenotaph for his father and brothers. After the bloody battle, not even their corpses were left. He was the only one left in the family to shoulder the burden. Jiang Pengji asked him to pass the remaining blood letter to Qin Gong. This was written by Su Fei for her, but Qin Gong was fine after reading it. Qin Gong endured the pain in his back as he opened the blood letter with trembling fingers. The image of his lord bending over the table and writing seemed to appear in his mind. Although he did not let it go, he stopped crying. After a while, he bowed to Jiang Pengji. His tone was stiff and difficult. Forgive me for my rudeness. May Magistrate of Liuzhou, give me a night and give me an answer tomorrow. It's all right. Jiang Pengji was very tolerant. After Qin Gong left, Jiang Pengji said, although I have done many schemes in exchange for sincerity, this is the only time I feel guilty. Wei Ci smiled faintly. It's enough that my lord has a clear conscience. You feel guilty, but it's nothing more than Officer Qin's pureness. He can't bear to do it. Jiang Pengji said, this Su Fei is also considered an expert in psychological attacks. The first is to attack conspiracies, the second is to attack friends, the third is to attack soldiers, and the third is to attack cities. Psychological attacks are the top, and attacking the city is the bottom. Psychological battles are the top, and military battles are the bottom, Wei Ci replied. It's really embarrassing to say such things too clearly. Su Fei wants to be strong for a lifetime, so he has to leave some leeway and face for himself. If he doesn't do this, Qin Gong won't completely pledge allegiance to my lord, and Su Fei won't be able to get any benefits. In the blood letter that Su Fei left for Qin Gong, there was no mention of him selling Qin Gong to Jiang Pengji as a bargaining chip. Instead, every word was written with Qin Gong in mind. He recalled the friendship between him and Qin Gong's father several times, and then thought of Qin Gong's eldest and second brothers dying in battle for him. He could not bear to see the bloodline of the Qin family being destroyed. He saw that Qin Gong was extremely talented and had a promising future, so he thought of ways to find a way out for Qin Gong. The blood letter he wrote to Jiang Pengji was the same. Su Fei did not directly state his purpose. Instead, he recalled the situation of the alliance meeting at Huangshui, and imperceptibly shortened the distance between them. They were obviously only friends, but in his words, they were very close. After recalling, he did not tearfully complain about how badly he was bullied by Su Bei. Instead, he talked about how good Qin Gong was. He hoped that Jiang Pengji would let bygones be bygones and put Qin Gong in an important position. He was a good seedling with good roots. If he was put in an important position, he would definitely make great contributions to Jiang Pengji. He was so certain that he thought highly of Qin Gong. He wrote it with such sincerity that Qin Gong naturally felt sad and touched. His lord always planned for him and considered for him, but he could not stay by his lord's side and shed his blood for her. How could he not cry? Only then did the audience realize what had happened. Their hearts felt heavy. When Mia Zhangxi, I originally wanted to be loyal to the ruler, but the ruler sent me away. Little brother, I feel wronged for you. Wei Ci saw that Jiang Pengji was deep in thought. He asked softly, is my lord thinking about Field Officer Qin? No, I'm thinking about you. Jiang Pengji said, if I end up in the same situation as Su Fei one day, I will kill you with my own hands. Chapter 11:14. In the ancient times, some people were so old-fashioned that they were detestable, some were so innocent that people pitied them, and some were so stubborn that it made people sigh. After Jiang Pengji changed her attitude, she enjoyed everything more. Should you send someone to keep an eye on Qin Gong? Are you worried that he will take the opportunity to commit suicide? Jiang Pengji asked. Wei Ci nodded in affirmation and said, don't worry, this fellow is not that weak. The most valuable quality he has is the word loyalty. After reading Su Fei's letter, he won't seek death. Wei Ci thought about it and suddenly felt that his suggestion was a little funny. Indeed, his suggestion just now was belittling Qin Gong. My lord is right, I was wrong. In the previous life, when Su Fei killed Su Bei, Wei Ci had yet to enter Jiang Pengji's camp. He was sacrificing his life for An Shui in Nansheng. However, he knew a little about Su Fei's situation. In the previous life, after Su Fei was killed by his cousin Su Bei, his general Qin Gong's whereabouts were unknown. His corpse was hard to find. Everyone thought he had died in the battle to break into the city. The truth was that Qin Gong had been shot by more than 20 arrows and had almost lost an arm. He climbed out of the pile of corpses with difficulty. He went to search for Su Fei's bloodline. Heaven rewarded those who persevered. He finally found Su Fei's eldest daughter in an abandoned well. Su Fei had 3 sons and 3 daughters. Apart from the eldest daughter, the others were born of a concubine. After the city was breached, the enemy troops rushed into the city like locusts. Su Fei's 3 sons and 3 daughters, as well as his wives and concubines, fled under the protection of the guards. Unfortunately, they encountered the ruffians and died after being humiliated. Only the eldest daughter took the opportunity to escape. She leaped into the dry well and luckily did not die. She endured for 2 days and 2 nights without food and water. Finally, Qin Gong arrived. Although the eldest daughter was alive, she had lost a leg and half of her face was ruined. Half of her face was as beautiful as a peach blossom, while the other half was as ugly as a ghost. Qin Gong rescued the bloodline of his former master and brought her to live in seclusion in a remote village to find a good opportunity for revenge. About half a year later, Su Bei was killed by the emperor. Qin Gong paid the price by swearing loyalty to Jiang Pengji in exchange for his former master's remains. He buried Su Fei's remains in the Su clan's territory. It was worth mentioning that Qin Gong married Su Fei's eldest daughter in the end. Although the woman was injured and could not bear children, Qin Gong did not take a concubine or take another wife. Instead, he adopted a son and changed his surname to Su. His loyalty to Su Fei was not the least bit fake. Because of this, Su Fei's actions in this lifetime made Wei Ci sigh even more. How pitiful was it to be wrongly entrusted with loyalty. Jiang Pengji's gaze fell on him. Then, what is Zixiao thinking about? I'm thinking about my lord, Wei Ci said. A scholar will die for his bosom friend without regrets even if he dies 9 times. To be able to have such a master, Ci is very fortunate. My only wish, all the regrets in his previous life had finally been fulfilled in this life. For no reason at all, the originally hungry audience let out a loud burp. The 2 of them were facing each other. Couldn't they just say whatever they wanted to say? Why were they thinking about each other? Xiao Pan, mercilessly kick over this bowl of sweet dog food. How dare you force it into the baby's mouth? Yi Lu Ling, the streamer and Beauty Ci have both changed. In the past, Beauty Ci was so cold and aloof. Now, he is showing off to the dogs with the streamer. Wu Jiang, the entire street exudes the sour stench of love. Only the baby exudes the fragrance of a single dog. The bullet screen was full of ghostly wails and howls. Jokes of ridicule and blessings covered the huge screen tightly. Yusue Jueo, if the streamer and Beauty Ci's marriage doesn't be broadcasted live, everyone will climb the internet cable and hack them. Xinyue, wait for the streamer to cook Beauty Ci, this bronze and iron frog. Ariukading. Shinjia, wait for my grandson to tell me that the streamer I've been following for decades is finally going to hold a wedding. Indifferent face JPG. Jiang Pengji and Wei Ci teamed up to bully the single dog. On the other side, Qin Gong tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He was experiencing a war in his heart. On one hand, it was his loyalty to his lord. On the other hand, it was his lord's entrustment and ardent expectations for him. For a moment, the 2 thoughts were entangled and could not be separated. Under the torment, time passed like a year. When the sky turned white, Qin Gong appeared in front of Jiang Pengji with a pair of puffy eye bags and dark circles. Qin Gong, you've been thinking for the whole night. Have you made up your mind? Jiang Pengji was dressed in a plain shirt. She had no makeup on, and her face was healthy. She looked more natural than usual. Even though Jiang Pengji was wearing a woman's shirt, Qin Gong could always feel an inexplicable deterrence from her when he saw her. This was a power that only someone who had been in a high position for a long time could have. Qin Gong's cheeks were pale and bloodless. As if he had experienced a difficult struggle, he suddenly bowed down and kowtowed. General Qin Gong greets the new lord. Jiang Pengji revealed an unsurprised smile. Qin Gong's choice was also within her expectations. Su Fei was done with his performance. It was her turn to appear next. Su Fei and I are allies. We were considered comrades in the past. Now that he's in prison and is in a precarious situation, I can't bear to see him. After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, Qin Gong's face gradually revealed a look of ecstasy. She acted as if she did not see it and continued, Su Fei wrote a book in blood. Every word he wrote was filled with blood. No one could not be moved. Considering our friendship in the past, I can't leave him in the lurch. Qin Gong, listen to my orders. Qin Gong gestured to accept the order. General Qin Gong, listen to your orders. Deploy 10,000 troops to Hu County immediately. Qin Gong was so happy that he was almost speechless. His hands that were cupped in a fist were trembling like a sieve. General, listen to my orders. In the end, Jiang Pengji sighed and added, Fengjing, it's not that I don't want to deploy more troops. It's just that the battle at the northern borderline last year and the battle at Sangzhou this year have depleted too much. Now that the troops and horses are exhausted, there's not much left in the grain depot. Otherwise, I would definitely. At this point, Jiang Pengji paused. She frowned, as if she was really in a difficult position. Qin Gong, who had finally calmed down, could not help but feel excited again. 10,000 troops and horses are enough. I thank my lord for your kindness. After Qin Gong retreated, Jiang Pengji saw that a bullet screen in the streaming room had become a hot topic. Herbivores was he, the little cutie is no match for the two drama queens working together. Su Fei attacked Qin Gong's heart and Jiang Pengji fooled him. The two of them made a deal. Qin Gong did not even have a chance to fight back. My husband Bai Feifei, you gave him 10,000 troops and horses directly? The new general has to be tested, right? Although the audience sympathized with Qin Gong, they were all staunch streamers. Everything was based on Jiang Pengji's interests. Of course, Jiang Pengji would not be so straightforward. Although Qin Gong was the commander, Jiang Pengji had also sent people to him. Yang Si was the military advisor. Qing Yuan and the military supervisor were to assist Qin Gong. Yang Si, who had just been emptied, was speechless. There was no end to it, was there? In contrast, Qing Yuan was excited. He finally did not have to stay in the rear to deal with government affairs or help his father write books. As the son of Qing Yuan was born in a scholarly family, but he also had the heart to fight on the battlefield. Upon receiving the order, Qing brought his second son over for a good lesson. Qing Yuan had a lot of theoretical knowledge, but he had no actual combat experience. He had to follow Yang Si as his leader. He had to learn humbly and ask for guidance. In the face of his old father's earnest teachings, Qing Yuan naturally agreed. There's another point. Your eldest brother is currently working under Su Pei's camp. Chapter 11:15. Qing had 2 sons and a daughter. His eldest son was an official in another place. His youngest son, Qing Yuan, and his daughter had not settled down yet, so they were raised by his side. When the whole family fled Sui and County, Qing took his wife, youngest son, and youngest daughter with him. He didn't have to worry about his eldest son. The eldest son, Qing Sun, courtesy named Gong Luo. After Qing settled down at Jiang Pengji's place, he tried to write a letter to his eldest son, hoping that he could work under Jiang Pengji. Now that the world was in chaos, it was too dangerous to be alone. Qing felt that he was getting older and older. He was afraid that he would never have the chance to see his son again. Unfortunately, Qing Sun was a staunch supporter of the landed gentry and had always been disdainful of interacting with the commoners. Jiang Pengji's position between the gentry and the commoners was too obvious. She was born in the gentry, but she supported the poor. It was a disgrace, so Qing Sun directly rejected Qing Cheng's suggestion. At that time, Qing Qing felt that something bad was going to happen. After so many years, the youngest son was actually going to oppose the eldest son. When Qing Qing thought of this matter, he felt deeply uneasy. He was not in the mood to work, and from time to time, he would be absent-minded. Feng Ren, Yuanjing, and the others naturally noticed such a small change. Over the years, the few of them would gather together from time to time to discuss academics, to study and perfect the Golden Scale Academy system and their teaching materials. Based on their friendship, it was reasonable for him to show some concern for his old friend. Master Yuanjing glanced at Qing Cheng's face and frowned slightly. He raised his hand and stroked his neatly trimmed beard. This face, he pondered for a while. Things were not looking good. On the other side, Feng Ren had already gotten some information from Qing Cheng. Knowing that he was worried about his eldest son and second son, Feng Ren was stunned. He was the most sensitive about this matter. They were thankful that their eldest son, Feng Gui, had taken on the responsibility of the clan leader, taking care of the clan and had yet to become an official. If Feng Gui also stepped into the muddy waters, the three brothers would be a trio of thorns. Both the palm and the back of the hand were flesh and blood. If one of them was injured or died, even the father would mourn inconsolably. Feng Ren had no choice but to comfort him. Children and grandchildren have their own blessings. Wen Fu, don't take it too hard. It was a pity that the world was in chaos. Who knew how many times such a play would have to be performed? The children had all grown up and had their own choices and aspirations. The path of life was chosen by them. Whether it was the road to hell or the broad road, as parents, they had no right to interfere. Qing Qing looked haggard as he said, I also want to get over it, but I had a dream last night. My heart still palpitates and feels uncomfortable. Feng Ren asked him, what dream? Qing Qing sighed and recalled carefully. Then, he said heavily, I dreamed that I had returned to the old house in Suian County. The house had been in disrepair for many years, and only the walls were left. Inside, it was densely covered with spider webs and snakes and insects. Somehow, Qing walked straight to his eldest son's old residence. Through the courtyard door, he saw two long worms coiled around a fishnet table in the courtyard. They were both dying. Qing was not afraid at all. At this time, a three-headed, red-beaked black bird flew in from outside the house. It was about 12 feet long and its wings could cover the sky. It rushed towards one of the heads and pecked at it. Qing panicked and wanted to hit the strange bird with a wooden stick. At this time, one of the long worms suddenly crashed into the wall. After saying that, he suppressed the palpitation in his heart. After that, Qing woke up in fright. Feng Ren was puzzled and turned to ask Master Yuanjing. I heard that you are proficient in the art of interpreting dreams. How do you interpret this dream? Qing Qing also looked at him. Master Yuanjing thought for a while and asked Qing Qing, are there any differences between the two worms? Qing Qing said, they look very similar. If you want to point out the differences, one is longer and thicker, while the other is shorter and thinner. Which one crashed into the wall? Qing Qing carefully recalled, the thicker one. After crashing into the wall, you woke up from the dream? Did you see what happened to the long worm? Qing Qing said, I don't know. After it crashed into the wall, half of its body was buried under the wall. I vaguely remember that the strange black bird seemed to want to peck it. After listening for a while, Master Yuanjing made a conclusion. Find a doctor to prescribe you 2 doses of calming decoctions. Qing Qing was speechless. Perhaps Master Yuanjing's words worked, but Qing Qing did not feel so bad. Seeing that he was not in good spirits, everyone tried their best to persuade him to stop what he was doing and go home to rest. Tang Yao, Master Yuanjing's student, had been holding it in for a long time. He was absent-minded for the entire afternoon. Tang Yao sent Master Yuanjing back to his mansion. Then, he stuttered, "Teacher." Master Yuanjing's face was calm. He asked calmly, "What do you want to ask?" "Mr. Cheng, that dream, it's very likely." "I know," Master Yuanjing said, "but can I tell Wenfu?" Tang Yao was silent for a while. He had only learned a little about the art of dream interpretation. He learned it from the master out of curiosity. Even he could see that the dream was strange. How could the master not know? He will definitely lose his son within a year, and it will be his eldest son. Looking at Wenfu's face, the patterns on his son's palace are messy, and there is a fine broken line. The Hall of Tears is sunken, and the color is slightly gray. All of these indicate that his son is in trouble. Also, his dream was that the bird ate the dragon and the snake, and the master lost his son. In the dream, he saw 2 long worms that were covered in scars in the courtyard. Not only was he not afraid, but he also stood up to protect the black bird when it tried to attack the long worm. It was obvious that he knew about it. With such a clear dream, it was no wonder that he felt uneasy. After that, the thick long worm hit the wall and died. I guess the eldest son didn't die in the hands of someone else. It was most likely suicide. Tang Yao was stunned. Can't it be avoided? Tang Yao had been in contact with Qing Qing for many years. His respect for him was second only to Master Yuanjing and was on par with Fengren. Master Yuanjing said, Wenfu's dream, rather than saying it was a sign of something, it was the most obscure worry in his heart. Tang Yao was speechless. "Teacher, you mean, do you really think Wenfu doesn't know anything?" Master Yuanjing sighed. "It's because he knows the situation that he had this dream. On the one hand, he knows the current situation, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to face reality. It's useless to say it. Do you think it can change?" Tang Yao said, "Things that haven't happened can always be changed, right?" Master Yuanjing smiled. However, this smile was very different from his usual kindness. There was a hint of sarcasm in it. The crux of the problem isn't whether it can be changed or not. It's whether the person involved can change, Master Yuanjing said. Qing Sun's temperament is destined to be different from the Lord. That year, Wenfu wrote a letter to his family hoping that his eldest son would give up his official position and reunite with his family. Did Qing Sun agree? Do you think the Lord will accommodate Qing Sun, get close to the aristocrats, alienate and suppress the poor? Or will Qing Sun change his original ambition and suddenly get close to the poor? Tang Yao felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Master Yuanjing continued, "It's because Wenfu knows the standpoint and ambition of his 2 sons that the 2 long worms fought in his dream. In the end, both of them were defeated. Lu Shi was powerful. Although Su Bei had the strength to fight, Qing Cheng was more inclined towards Lu Shi. Therefore, the one who was defeated in the dream and killed himself was the thicker worm. To put it bluntly, this dream was Wenfu's inner judgment of the situation." Tang Yao was speechless for a while. He mumbled, "No wonder," Master Yuanjing said, "although the dream can be a sign, it's more like the other side of the human heart." So, it wasn't the dream that predicted that Master Cheng would lose his son. Instead, it was his inner belief that he would lose his son. Chapter 11:16. Yang Si and Qing Yuan, one was a military advisor, the other was a military supervisor. The 2 of them were both assistants and monitors for Qin Gong. Qin Gong was well aware of this, but it did not hinder his gratitude and fondness for Jianghu. 10,000 soldiers and horses, and 10,000 elites with abundant rations and fodder, would definitely be able to save his old master from danger. When Qin Gong met the 2 for the first time, they exchanged names and had a first impression of each other. Initial Qilin shape, "This kid isn't bad," Yang Si probed Qin Gong with his words. His expression did not change, but he was secretly praising Su Fei's generosity. How could he bear to part with such a good seedling? Qin Gong was still young, but he had his own unique views and style when it came to arranging troops. There were many aspects that even made Yang Si's eyes light up. Yang Si felt that he was not looking at a person, but a piece of unpolished jade, which made people itch to look at it. Apart from that, Qin Gong had something else that was very valuable: loyalty. Which lord wouldn't like a talented and loyal general? Not only did he like it, but he also had more opportunities to render meritorious service than ordinary people. Qing Yuan didn't feel that deeply, but he was also very sure of Qin Gong. He is indeed a good seedling. No wonder the Lord is willing to trust him. A general who had just defected dared to allocate 10,000 soldiers and sufficient provisions. If this wasn't love and trust, what else could it be? After marching for a few days, Qing Yuan liked Qin Gong even more. He was strict with the army but not harsh. He listened to suggestions and had his own opinions. Most importantly, Qin Gong was neither conceited nor arrogant. He would not act smart either. Which army supervisor would not like such a commander? Yang Si was also very worry-free. He had worked together with Dian Yan, this honest and straightforward man, for many years. His patience had been honed, and he was no longer the same as before. Now that it was Qin Gong, he couldn't be happier. Qin Gong sent Jiang Pengji off and set off alone. He could hide from the eyes of Su Pei's scouts by taking a secluded path, but Jiang Pengji had ordered him to deploy 10,000 troops to support Hu County. It would be extremely difficult to conceal the whereabouts of the 10,000 troops. Moreover, ever since Jiang Pengji ended the Tsang Prefecture campaign, Su Bei's nerves had been stretched taut. According to Han Yu's analysis, after Jiang Pengji wiped out Sangzhou, her next target would be either Huang Song or him. Now that Huang Song and Jiang Pengji had peacefully settled their dispute, they probably wouldn't fight in the near future. Without a doubt, Su Bei would most likely become her next opponent. Su Bei maintained a high level of vigilance throughout. Any sign of Jiang Pengji's troop movements would attract his attention. A few days after Qin Gong's army departed, Su Bei received an urgent secret letter. Lu Lanting just won't stop for a second. Su Pei muttered in a low voice. From his tone, it was unclear whether he was gritting his teeth or heaving a sigh of relief. It was probably the latter. After all, he couldn't stand being tense for a long time. Now that the dust had settled, he felt relieved. "My lord, is there any movement from Lushi?" Hearing Su Bei's mumbling, Ching Sun, who was seated below, asked. Su Pei replied, according to the secret letter, the reason Lu Shi sent 10,000 soldiers south was most likely because of me. The small feudal vassals in the south of Dongqing had almost been divided up by him and Huang Song. Now, only he and Huang Song were left. If he wasn't going to hit Huang Song, then he was definitely going to hit him. Ching Sun asked again, "Who is the commander?" Su Bei replied, "The scouts reported that the commander is a very young general." Ching Sun frowned. The names of the generals under Jiang Pengji's banner had been made public. The only young general seemed to be Li Yun, right? Could it be Li Yun? Li Hanmei? Su Bei denied, "No, the commander's flag has the word Qin written on it." Say, when did Lanting have a young general with the surname Qin? Ching Sun replied, "He's probably newly recruited." Since Lu Shi dares to let an unknown young general lead 10,000 men as the vanguard, he can't be underestimated. Due to their trust in Jiang Pengji, the outside world had a higher opinion of Qin Gong. I think so too. Lanting's judgment can be trusted. He thought of his right-hand man. Right, has Wen been returned yet? He had been relying on Han Yu more and more over the years, but because of his pride, he didn't want to place all his chips on Han Yu. In order to keep him in check, Su Bei had promoted many virtuous and respectable scholars who had sought refuge with him. If Wei Ci was here, he would know that Su Bei's entourage was rather luxurious, but most of them were supporters of the aristocratic families. Although the commoners wouldn't be discriminated against or neglected by Su Bei, they weren't very useful. They were basically left on the cold bench. Ching Sun replied, "Military advisor Han is still handling matters in Zhe County. I estimate it will take another half a month or so." Su Bei frowned after hearing this. He was too reliant on Han Yu. No matter what happened, as long as Han Yu analyzed it carefully, he would be able to clearly understand the inner workings of the situation. It was as if he had taken a tranquilizer. Now that Han Yu wasn't by his side, it would be difficult to find someone to discuss with. Fortunately, these 10,000 men were only the vanguard. Most of them were mainly probing. If they were to fight, it would be a feint. Su Bei wasn't worried that they would be stupid enough to use 10,000 men to fight him head-on. Su Bei said, "If that's the case, we'll discuss this matter when Wenbin returns." Su Bei then found an excuse to leave. Ching Sun sent him off respectfully. When Su Bei was out of sight, Ching Sun left the meeting hall. Although it seemed calm on the surface, a turbulent undercurrent was brewing. "Master, why did you come back so early today?" When he returned to the mansion, his wife came forward with a maidservant. She took the cloak he had taken off and asked him in a soft and gentle voice. Ching Sun replied, "I came back first since there was nothing to do in the meeting hall." His wife was startled. She had shared a bed with Ching Sun for almost 10 years. She had completely mastered the ability to read people's minds by looking at their faces. Although Ching Sun didn't seem to be affected on the surface, he must have been suppressing his anger. Could it be that his colleagues had made things difficult for him in the meeting hall? "Don't overthink it. Your husband is fine." Ching Sun turned around and went to the study. He returned his dinner without even touching a single chopstick. Of course he was fine. Su Bei had summoned him today and mentioned the secret letter. It was obvious that he wanted to discuss this matter with him, but he changed his mind at the last minute. His lord's attitude was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. As an official, he couldn't possibly resent his lord. Instead, he felt that Han Yu was disgusting. After suppressing it for an entire night, he finally managed to endure this matter. Who knew that the next day, Su Bei would summon all the officials to the meeting hall? It turned out that he had received another secret letter. Today's secret letter was obtained by the scouts after they had gone deep into the investigation. They hurriedly sent it over again. Ching Sun listened attentively for a long time. There were 3 main points in the second secret letter. First, the commander-in-chief's surname was Qin Gong. He was young and probably hadn't been crowned yet. Second, this time the military counselor was an old acquaintance, Yang Si. They had been drinking together a few months ago, but now they were going to turn against each other. Third, this army of more than 10,000 was heading straight for Shanghai County instead of Zhe County. The first and second points were understandable, but the third point was used as the main point. It seemed somewhat unworthy of the name. If one knew that Qin Gong was originally the son of a general under Su Fei's command, then it would be easier to understand. One of the strategists said, "I heard that the bloodline of the Qin family is extremely loyal. Why would they seek refuge with the second master at this time?" The Qin family was considered a vassal of the Su family. Their ancestors had been loyal to the Su family since then. For more than 300 years, there hadn't been a single case of rebellion. Chapter 11:17. Everyone knew that the Qin family held a special position in the Su family. The Qin family was loyal to a descendant who would be the next head of the family. The current head of the family was Su Bei, but the Qin family had always been loyal to Su Fei. Wasn't this a clear slap to his face, announcing to the world that his position as head of the family had been seized through illegal means? Every time he thought of this, Su Bei wished that his grandfather would appear in his dreams in the middle of the night so that he could clarify the situation. As the eldest grandson of the first wife, how was he inferior to Su Fei? It was precisely because of the old man's bias and denial that Su Bei was so eager to defeat Su Fei. He wanted to let the world know that Su Fei was inferior to him. The fact that he was able to obtain the position of patriarch was a well-deserved one. Now, Su Fei was holed up in a corner. Seeing that he could not hold on any longer, Su Bei felt that the rock that had been pressing down on his heart was finally about to be removed. Who knew that an unforeseen event would occur at this moment? Su Bei suppressed the restlessness and rage in his heart and said darkly, "The Qin family is loyal and unwavering." The entire family died in battle for Su Fei, leaving only Qin Gong. Tell me, why did Qin Gong seek refuge with Lu Shi? Why did he receive over 10,000 troops from Lu Shi and head straight to Hu County? The officials bowed down, not daring to look at Su Bei's gloomy face. Regardless of the twists and turns, at least one thing was certain. With Lu Shi interfering in this matter, it would be difficult for Su Bei to kill his cousin Su Fei. One by one, are you afraid to speak or do you not know? Su Pei was so angry that he stood up from his seat, raising his hand to point at the dense mass of officials below. Who would dare to stand out at this time? Ching Sun even heard someone whispering to the side. If only Han Yu was here. Han Yu's character was rather straightforward. Except for special circumstances, he would usually speak his mind. Although such a character was not likable, he was a good candidate to take the blame at critical times. If he was here, before Su Bei could question him, he would have already thought of a way to extinguish the fire. How would the atmosphere have become so tense? My lord, the crux of this matter is not who Qin Gong sought refuge with, but Lu Shi. Ching Sun endured the gazes of dozens of people in the hall and said slowly, the conflict between my lord and Su Fei can be described as a feud between feudal vassals. To put it simply, it is a family matter between brothers. Logically or emotionally, Lu Shi shouldn't have intervened, let alone helped one side. Furthermore, my lord and Lu Shi have known each other since they were young. During the Huang River Conference, the lord had taken care of her many times. Now, she didn't care about their past relationship and interfered in the lord's family matters. His actions are against justice and justice. To put it bluntly, this person was a busybody. No matter what, Su Bei had taken care of her in the past. Was this how she repaid him? Humans do things. Su Bei suppressed the anger in his heart, but Ching Sun's words were reasonable. He could not refute or reprimand him. Lu Shi. Lu Lanting is a traitor. So what if he does something immoral? Who can control her? Su Bei's words indirectly acknowledged Ching Sun's comments about Jiang Pengji. Ching Sun suggested with a calm expression. Our lord has ordered someone to send a written demand for an explanation from Lu Shi. It was good that she could retreat. My lord is also in the right if he refuses to retreat. As soon as these words were spoken, Su Bei's expression of anticipation immediately vanished. It was as if a volcano was being suppressed in his eyes. Is this something that can be resolved with a written demand? Su Bei was unable to restrain his anger. He felt that Ching Sun was speaking nonsense and wasting his time and anticipation. Ching Sun was not afraid. Instead, he said calmly, Lu Shi's intentions are not with Su Fei, but with the Lord. It's just that she has no justifiable reason to attack. If she rashly attacks the Lord, she will bear the stigma of ungrateful. If the Lord loses her cool first, she will have an excuse to attack. Now, she is only interfering in the Lord's family matters and pulling Su Fei along. At the end of the day, she hasn't really. Say no more. Let me think about this matter. Su Bei interrupted Ching Sun unhappily. Ching Sun could only swallow the words that were stuck in his tongue and silently return to his seat. Given the current situation, a war was inevitable. The only difference was who had the initiative and who had more justifiable reason to attack. Ching Sun was afraid that the Lord would act rashly and give Lu Shi a chance to pick a fight. Su Bei did not want to hear this. He wanted to avoid a war as much as possible. Not long after Qing Yuan sat down, his colleague beside him stepped forward. Replying to the Lord, I think one thing that Gong Luo just said is very reasonable. Lu Shi helping Su Fei is essentially interfering in the Lord's family matters. If the Lord takes care of this family matter before her vanguard arrives, she will naturally have no other reason to attack again. Hearing this, Ching Sun suddenly clenched his fists and looked at his colleague beside him in disbelief. Lu Shi was determined to fight. How could he stop just because Su Fei was the first to die? If things went awry, he would be attacked from both sides. If the Lord dealt with Su Fei, it might even help Jiang Pengji solve a problem. From Ching Sun's point of view, since a war was going to break out sooner or later, why not take the initiative and make sufficient preparations? Unexpectedly, Su Bei was a little interested in this suggestion. No matter why Qin Gong joined Jiang Pengji's camp, it was partly due to Su Fei's incitement. He was afraid that Su Fei would use Jiang Pengji's power to make a comeback. This was not something he wanted to see. The person who understood you the most was often not a friend but an opponent. The Su brothers were no exception. Su Bei also understood his cousin. Just like how he could not accept his grandfather's favoritism towards Su Fei similarly resented himself for wanting to monopolize everything just because he was the eldest grandson. They could lose to others, but they could not accept losing to their opponents. Does he really think that Lu Shi is his last hope? Su Bei sneered in his heart. His eyes flashed with a trace of scheming. He would definitely not give Su Fei any chance to make a comeback. Su Fei did not expect that Su Bei would disregard the fact that he was from the same clan and kill him. This was beyond Su Fei's expectations, but it was within Jiang Pengji's expectations. Ask her for help? The price was huge. Basically, no one could afford it. Qin Gong led more than 10,000 elite troops to Hu County. On the way, he received a secret report. Su Bei's army had made a move. They had abandoned the siege and turned to attack Shanwu City. If nothing went wrong, Su Fei would at most be able to hold on for another 10 days. Shanwu City's terrain was steep. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. That was why Su Fei could hide there for a while. However, if Su Bei really attacked the city regardless of the price, Su Fei would be able to hold on for at most 10 days. How? When Qin Gong heard the news, he was so shocked that he almost fell off his horse. It was as if all the blood in his body was about to flow backwards. How far is it from here to Shanwu City? Yang Si asked the messenger. The messenger replied, at least half a month. Half a month? There was not enough time. Qin Gong tightened his grip on the reins. The more panicked he was, the calmer his mind became. Military advisor. I want to bring a few men to take a shortcut. If everything goes smoothly, we can shorten the journey by at least 6 days. 6 days? Yang Si was shocked. He said bluntly, does Officer Qin think that I do not understand the 2 counties of Zhejiang and Hu? These 2 areas are vast, comparable to 2 ordinary prefectures. Officer Qin wants to shorten the journey by 6 days. That's a distance of a prefecture. Do you intend to only rest for an hour a day? Even if you can endure it, the troops won't be able to. If we force our way there, we'll just be sending 10,000 exhausted troops to the enemy. Yang Si thought that Qin Gong was a calm and good seedling. Now that he saw it, he was even more reckless than Dian Yen. Dian Yen was slow-witted, but at least he was obedient. He would not go west if he was told to. Chapter 11:18. Although Qin Gong served Jiang Pengji as his master, his heart was still biased towards his former master, Su Fei. Now that his former master was in trouble, how could Qin Gong sit still and continue on his journey? He wished he could grow a pair of wings and fly to Su Fei's side. Yang Si furrowed his brows and asked him, Commandant Qin, are you determined to cast aside this 10,000-strong army and fight alone? Qin Gong was silent for a moment, not knowing how to answer. Even if he rushed to Shanwu City, his body would be close to its limit. What other purpose was there besides sending the enemy's head? If he didn't do that, was he supposed to watch Shanwu City fall and his former master die in the hands of others? He couldn't do that. Yang Si squinted his eyes. Something seemed to be brewing in his calm eyes, but it disappeared in a flash. It was so fast that no one could catch it. When the time was right, Yang Si smiled faintly and said leisurely, I have a plan. I have a plan that might be able to solve this urgent problem. Qin Gong said hurriedly, Military counselor, tell me quickly. If we can solve this problem, you will be my benefactor. Yang Si could not bear to tease Qin Gong, who was so anxious that his eyes turned red. This plan is simple. Yang Si smiled and said, what is false is true, and what is true is false. Our vanguard only has 10,000 people, but it is impossible for Su Pei's scouts to cover the entire north of Dongqing. Why don't we spread false news and fabricate it, making them suspect that the vanguard battalion is just bait to attract their attention, while the real main force took a detour and split into three, launching a pincer attack on Jianghu County. Qin Gong listened carefully, and his eyes brightened. Military counselor, do you mean to let them transfer the frontline troops back to defend and reduce the pressure on Jianghu City? The resources in Jianghu City are still sufficient. It will not be easy to break the city with the steep terrain and natural barriers. If we speed up our march, maybe we can reach Jianghu City before it falls? Yang Si put his hands in his sleeves and smiled faintly. Exactly. This was a good idea, but Qin Gong's smile gradually disappeared when he thought of something else. He frowned and said, military counselor's plan is good, but Han Yu, Su Pei's advisor, is not easy to deal with. Apart from him, there is also Wu Wei from Jiangding County in Qinzhou. Sir's plan might be seen through in front of the two of them. Yang Si's expression was somewhat stiff. Commandant Qin, as far as I know, Han Wenbin is not in Hu County at this time, Yang Si said. Also, what's with the 5 flavors? Qin Gong was puzzled. Are you referring to Wu Wei? It is said that this person is close friends with Han Yu. When the two of them work together, it is extremely difficult to deal with them. Qin Gong's father and elder brother had even suffered a loss at the hands of this man. However, in the past few months, there had been no news from the front lines about 5 flavors. It was as if he had disappeared. Yang Si said embarrassedly, if the 5 flavors you're talking about are sour, bitter, sweet, spicy, and salty, that's a nickname I gave myself. Qin Gong, 2 years ago, in order to solidify the alliance between Su Bei and his lord, Yang Si had used their relationship as allies to come up with many ideas for Su Bei's sake. This was to demonstrate their sincerity in forming an alliance. He also wanted to use this opportunity to find out the ins and outs of Zhejiang Shanghai Commandery. Yang Si didn't want his lord to misunderstand, so when he was in Su Bei's territory, he often asked people to call him by other names. Well, the nickname he gave himself was 5 flavors. Sour, bitter, sweet, spicy, salty. It was a nickname that had the flavor of a foodie. He didn't like those elegant nicknames that were full of artistic flavor, but he was rather fond of the common name, 5 flavors. Qin Gong's eyelids twitched. The military advisor is 5 flavors? For some reason, the nickname that Yang Si usually liked now felt somewhat shameful. Yes. Qin Gong's confidence increased after receiving a positive reply. We'll do as the military advisor says. Yang Si was 5 flavors. This truth gave him an inexplicable confidence and made him feel much more at ease. It was unrealistic to shorten the journey by 6 days, but it was still possible to shorten the journey by 2 to 3 days if they worked hard. Not only did it ensure speed, but it also ensured the combat strength of the soldiers. Jianghu City was on the brink of destruction. The enemy outside the city launched continuous attacks day and night, and the soldiers under Su Fei's tent could only struggle to cope. As the days passed, the originally sturdy city walls became mottled, and obvious signs of damage appeared on the walls. Regardless of whether it was the attacker or the defender, they would have to pay a terrible price for every attack. When the gongs were sounded to retreat, both sides would leave behind many corpses of their soldiers. The air was filled with the stench of blood for several days. Su Fei counted the days with his fingers. His heart was tormented, and his already dry hair was dyed gray in just a few days. The reinforcements haven't arrived yet? He had to ask this question every day, sometimes more than 10 times. Every time, he received an answer that disappointed him. They haven't arrived. Su Fei's nerves were stretched taut, and his emotions were getting out of control. Because he was tired of defending, he didn't notice that Su Bei's army's attacks had eased up in recent days. This easing was only relative. Jianghu City's defeat was already a foregone conclusion. The only difference was whether it was earlier or later. Unbeknownst to him, Su Bei's side was panicking because of the rumors that Yang Si had spread. He couldn't make up his mind for a while. The secret envoy has sent back news that Lu Shi's army used 10,000 vanguard soldiers as bait. They secretly split into 3 groups and launched a sneak attack on Jia County. If this news is true, why don't our lord temporarily postpone the attack and return to help stabilize Jia County? Su Fei is already an arrow at the end of its flight. It's not worth the risk. There were many such voices, but there were also different voices. Qing Sun said, the secret envoy's news can't be completely trusted. These few days, there weren't any traces of Lu Shi splitting his army to launch a sneak attack. His colleague refuted, since it's a sneak attack, how can it be easily discovered by the scouts? What is a surprise attack? The important thing is to catch the enemy off guard and attack when they are unprepared. Qing Sun frowned, his eyes filled with disgust. He retorted, since it's a surprise attack, how did the secret envoy receive this news? If the secret envoy could receive this news, there was no reason that the scouts at the front would not have discovered traces of the army. His colleague choked on his words. Compared to Qing Sun's radicalism, the others in the tent were more conservative. They didn't seek to be meritorious, but to avoid mistakes. There was nothing wrong with being more cautious. The scouts' movements were more obvious. They were a big target and it was easy for the enemy to avoid them. The secret envoy would disguise himself as a commoner and blend into various places. It would be difficult for the enemy to detect him. The 2 sources of information were different, but they couldn't deny that the enemy did not split their army. After arguing for what was right, Qing Sun and his colleagues could only take a step back and choose a more conservative plan. Mobilize some of the troops to reinforce Jianghu city and continue attacking. All of this fell into Yang Xi's calculations. Until, Han Yu finished his work in Jia County and hurriedly rushed to the front line in Shanghai County. Halfway there, he realized that his own army had retreated and turned pale with fright. Su Bei's army crushed Su Fei. How could he be attacked? Han Yu was so angry that his hair was about to stand on end. Who asked Su Bei to attack Su Fei? He really wanted to attack Su Fei. Not only did he work so hard for Lu Shi, he even helped Lu Shi get rid of a hidden danger. So be it. Who asked Su Bei to withdraw some of his troops to reinforce Jia County? The 3 armies sounded intimidating, but if they wanted to launch a sneak attack without anyone knowing, each army would at most have 2,000 to 3,000 men. The 3 armies added up to less than 10,000 men. How could they penetrate the vast Jia County? It sounded like Yang Xi's smokescreen. Chapter 11-19. The reinforcements haven't arrived yet? Su Fei's eyes were bloodshot. Due to the lack of sleep for a long time, his eyes were dark and swollen. He looked especially haggard. When he repeated this question, the leader of the guards beside him replied in despair, "They haven't arrived. My lord, please give up. A round trip from Mountain Urn City to Wanzhou will take more than 2 months. Even if Colonel Qin is a fine steed, he won't make it in time." Su Fei's face turned ashen, and a dispirited aura encircled him. "You can leave, I want some time alone." Su Fei seemed to have been drained of all his energy. He slumped onto the mat, his eyes staring ahead listlessly. If the enemy wasn't Su Bei, he might not have been able to hold on. The position of the Su family head had always been given to the most capable. Su Bei was only born a few days earlier and was lucky enough to have the title of the eldest legitimate grandson. Apart from that, he was nothing. If Su Bei hadn't used dirty tricks, how could he have become the head of the family? Su Fei had always been brooding over this. In this lifetime, he, Su Fei, could lose to anyone but Su Bei. Seeing Su Fei's state, the leader of the guards was anxious, but he didn't dare to anger him further. The sky gradually darkened, and the battle cries outside Mountain Urn City gradually subsided. Watching the orange sunset gradually sink from the west, Su Fei's taut nerves temporarily relaxed. However, he knew that after this night, an even more intense attack would come tomorrow. There weren't many weapons left in the city. "What's the situation outside the city?" Su Fei asked. "The number of casualties has increased by 500. There are only 5,000 soldiers left in the city. If we attack again tomorrow, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold the city gates." The old general guarding the city gates said tiredly, "At noon today, the enemy's vanguard broke through the city gates. Hundreds of them charged into the city. If not for the soldiers blocking the gates with spears, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to hold them. The situation tomorrow will be even worse. We won't be able to hold Mountain Ern City." Mountain Ern City was lacking in resources, and the soldiers had suffered heavy casualties. It looked like they were at the end of their rope. The old general said hoarsely, "My lord, why don't we?" Su Fei stared straight at him, his thin lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't say a word. The old general knew that Su Fei was unhappy, but it was too late to say some things now. He said earnestly, "Where there's life, there's hope. My lord is so noble, why do you want to perish together with the rubble? Listen to this old official's words. You should disguise yourself and let the guards escort you and the mistress out of Mountain Ern City." If the old general stayed behind to delay them and attract the majority of the troops, there might still be a chance of survival. If we continue to stay in Jianghu City, sooner or later we will become a turtle in their jar. The old general was straightforward and didn't notice that his choice of words was inappropriate. How could Su Fei be a turtle? Su Fei's fists loosened and then tightened and loosened again. His expression kept changing, just like the torment and hesitation in his heart. The old general advised, "Your Highness, make a decision as soon as possible." Su Fei took a deep breath and closed his eyes to hide the pain surging in them. "All right," he agreed. Abandoning the Barbican city to escape would mean admitting that he was inferior to Su Bei. How could Su Fei be willing to accept this? The old general heaved a sigh of relief. He got up with difficulty and bowed to Su Fei, then slowly bowed and retreated. The old man was getting on in years. Regardless of physical strength or combat ability, he couldn't compare to a young man. Seeing his old companions die in battle one by one, the old general felt extremely pained. However, he couldn't show it and affect the morale of the army. The night was dark and the enemy didn't come to ambush them. However, no one dared to let their guard down. They were afraid that if they slept, they wouldn't wake up again. The old general personally went to the city gates to check on the defense. He didn't expect to be able to defend the city tomorrow. He just hoped to delay for a while longer to buy time for his lord. That night, the Su residence in Jianghu City was brightly lit. Su Fei's wife dismissed most of the maids and servants. The women were extremely busy. Not only did they have to pack up gold and silver, but they also had to prepare rations, water, and carriages. As the mistress of the house, the first wife could still hold the fort. However, the women in the courtyard were crying and wailing. Their emotions affected their children. A few sons and daughters of concubines were crying in the arms of their nannies or birth mothers, tears dripping down their cheeks. The eldest daughter, who was now 11 years old, was the calmest. Not only did she not cry, she even helped her mother pack up. Bringing jewelry at a time like this? The first wife saw the concubines packed up one by one. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. His most favored concubine had 5 chests of clothes and jewelry. Now, she didn't even care about her life, but still cared about beauty. At a critical moment, could these jewelry become food and water? When they were hungry or thirsty, did they rely on gold and silver jewelry to survive? The concubine who was reprimanded blushed and immediately tried to defend herself. "Why can't I bring it? These are all gifts from Master. If I lose any one of them and Master asks, I won't be able to bear the responsibility." This noble concubine was the one with the most confidence in the residence because her belly was very strong. Su Fei had 3 sons and 3 daughters. 2 of the sons of concubines were born from her belly. The first wife and Su Fei had been married for many years. Until now, they only had 1 daughter. For the sake of her children, the first wife could only turn a blind eye to the concubine's jealousy. "Mother, don't worry about her. If she likes to wear it, then let her wear it. Daughter wants to see if father will let her get on the carriage." The first wife was about to get angry when her right hand was gently held by her daughter. A concubine is a concubine, something that can't be shown in public. They were running for their lives, not on a spring outing. The concubine choked and her pretty face turned red with anger. She knew that this eldest daughter had a fiery temperament, but she didn't expect her to be so vulgar. She dared to scold her in front of her Shu mother. I am your Shu mother. How dare you insult me like this? A Shu mother is also a mother, but are you worthy? The concubine was about to get angry when she saw Su Fei's figure. At this time, she swallowed back her words. She pinched the handkerchief and pressed it against her watery eyes, as if she had been greatly wronged. If Su Fei saw her like this, she would most likely come over and ask a few questions. She could then accuse her. The result was unexpected. Su Fei went straight inside. She passed by a few beautiful concubines and asked the first wife, "Everything is ready?" The first wife replied, "Everything is ready." Su Fei sighed softly. Then let's go. The concubine's sons and daughters were also perceptive. They were crying hoarsely just now, but when Su Fei came, they became sobs. Su Fei led the way and was about to leave. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at the big chests. An inexplicable anger filled his chest. Is this what you mean by everything is ready? The first wife glanced at them and secretly curled her lips. These chests are not mine. Even my paternal family only picked 2 as souvenirs. Su Fei's eyes suddenly turned. The concubine who was originally planning how to accuse her was shocked. She had served Su Fei for many years. When had she ever seen such a scary look? It was as if a beast would jump out in the next second and bite off her neck. These are concubines. They are all gifts from Master. I can't bear to part with any of them. Su Fei looked at her a few times and suddenly snorted coldly. The concubine thought she was safe and showed a charming smile again. Chapter 11:20. She bent over in pain, and the smile on her face froze. Su Fei exerted a little force, and the tip of the sword slid out of her body. Blood stained the ground, splashed on the boxes, stained her dress, and stung the eyes of the onlookers. Su Fei said coldly, "Let's go." A woman who did not understand the situation would only be a burden. Since she could not bear to part with these things, then let her bring them to the Yellow Springs. Su Fei was not a broad-minded person. He did not plan to take this concubine away, but she would be humiliated in the city, and sooner or later she would die. It was better to die now, and leave everything clean. Whoever is reluctant to part with her can also stay behind to accompany her. Once he said this, how would those women dare to court death? Witnessing their mother being killed, the 2 bastards cried out in fear, and one by one asked for their mother. They cried with all their might, and the ear-piercing sound pierced everyone's eardrums. Usually, Su Fei would have comforted them, but now he looked at them coldly, and his brows furrowed impatiently. To prevent Su Fei from losing control of his emotions and doing something shocking, the main wife spoke up in time. "Master, it's getting late." After Su Fei heard this, he walked out of the hall with a gloomy face. There were 5 plain carriages outside the residence. 4 were used to carry people, and 1 was used to carry rice, dry food, and luggage. Su Fei did not have many wives and concubines, but they were not few either. Just the children alone could take up a carriage. When everything was ready, the sky was still dark, like the ink in the inkstone that could not be melted. Everyone squeezed into the narrow carriage, and everyone's expression was not good. Before he could sit down, he heard the sound of hurried footsteps coming from outside, followed by a breathless report. "Report, the enemy has launched a sneak attack. One of the city gates has been captured. Please leave quickly, my lord." Su Fei's face turned pale, and the women panicked, tears welling up in their eyes. The children cried loudly, and their cries made people's heads hurt. Su Fei's eldest daughter nestled in her mother's arms, stubbornly pursing her lips, and her bright eyes were filled with panic. The main wife felt her daughter trembling, and comforted her gently. "Don't worry, mother is here." Although she said that, her palms were sweating and her heart was beating like a drum. In a sense, women in troubled times were inferior to livestock. The first wife didn't dare to think about it. If it was necessary, would Su Fei abandon them? Probably, right? She thought blankly. The wheels of the cart rolled forward. The sky outside was still pitch black, just like everyone's situation at the moment. There was no hope at all. The battle cries were left behind by the carriage. Only the sound of rolling wheels and clashing armor could be heard. Su Fei's eldest daughter plucked up her courage and lifted the curtain. She saw that the horizon behind the carriage was dotted with orange dots, as if the sun was rising from the east. Taking a closer look, it wasn't the sun at all. It was clearly a fiery light that soared into the sky. Tongues of fire were wreaking havoc in Mountain Urn City, turning the familiar scenery into ashes. Mother, her mouth and tongue were dry, and her beating heart seemed to be out of her control, making her feel an inexplicable fear and panic. Under the protection of the guards, the caravan safely left the city. Su Fei didn't feel lucky because danger was everywhere. The enemy could catch up at any time. The soldier who was searching for Su Fei's whereabouts reported, "My lord, we've searched everywhere." "He's not here?" Su Fei asked. "He escaped." At this moment, someone under the tent said, "My lord, I don't think he's gone far. If we go after him now, we can still catch up." Su Fei's heart wavered. Regarding this decision, he was against it. It was true that he wanted to defeat Su Fei, but he didn't hate him to the point where he had to take his life. If he were to catch him now, how to deal with him would become a problem. No matter how fiercely he and Su Fei fought, they were still cousins. Rounding it up, they were blood brothers. An elder brother killing a younger brother, how could it be heard? Without waiting for Su Fei to finish hesitating, someone added, "My lord, letting a tiger return to the mountains will cause endless trouble in the future. Please reconsider." Letting a tiger return to the mountains? That's right. If he let Su Fei go, the other party wouldn't appreciate it. Su Fei became hot-headed and ordered, "Send people to chase after him. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse." By the time he realized what he had said, it was already too late to retract his words. It wasn't that the officials wanted Su Fei dead, but they thought themselves clever and thought that this was Su Fei's true intentions. The Barbican city was destroyed, and the commoners in the city were in a state of panic. They packed their belongings and prepared to flee the chaos of war with their families. In an instant, the situation became even more chaotic. The water was murky, and naturally, there were many people who tried to fish in troubled waters. How did these people fish in troubled waters? The more despicable ones would steal money and hide it. The more despicable ones would kidnap women to be used as reserve soldiers in the brothel. They might even drag people to a deserted place and rape them. The most despicable ones would directly slaughter innocent commoners and use their heads as military contributions. Of course, the ones who did these things might not necessarily be real soldiers. Soldiers were also divided into different ranks. Most of the people who did these things were water soldiers. However, they were tarnishing the reputation of the entire military camp. During war, the various feudal vassals loved to brag about their military strength and brainlessly add water. Between a 400,000-strong army and a 1,000,000-strong army, of course the latter sounded more impressive. Let's take a chestnut. If a feudal vassal had a 1,000,000-strong army, excluding the amount of bragging, there would only be 400,000 survivors. This didn't mean that the military strength of the feudal vassal's camp was really 400,000. There might only be 100,000 soldiers who could really be considered as soldiers in the feudal vassal's camp. These people had military status, enjoyed military benefits, and were promoted and had their salaries raised when they performed military functions. The military expenses of the feudal vassal were all used on them. Weapons and armor were also provided to them first. Excluding these 100,000 people, what were the remaining 300,000? The rest were water soldiers. This was the same principle as pouring water into pork. The water that was poured into the pork could not be eaten as meat, but it could increase the overall weight of the pork. These water soldiers were randomly recruited to act as human heads. There were many of them, but they didn't have much combat power. There were all sorts of people from all walks of life. Many of them couldn't live any longer and sneaked in to eat. If the wind was favorable, they would charge forward. If the wind was against them, they would turn around and flee. For these people, the military camp's discipline couldn't restrain them at all. Under the influence of war, their hostility was also the heaviest. It was extremely easy for them to do evil in an atmosphere of indulgence. In the chaos of war, they did some bad things to fill their pockets. Who would tell on them? What's more, they ran away after making a profit. Who would go to war to catch them? Because of the existence of these people, the people of Jianghu city were anxious and wanted to escape. Not escape. Stay where they were and wait for death? My lord, the pursuers have caught up, because they couldn't find the whereabouts of Su Fei and the others. They could only cast a wide net and send out several teams to search for them. This also caused the number of enemies who found traces of Su Fei and the others to be small. If they fought hard, they could still kill their way out. After a fierce battle, the 5 carriages were scattered by the chaotic army. When Su Fei heard this news, his entire face turned green. My lord, most of the guards were by Su Fei's side, so they could still fight. Turn back. Chapter 11:21. My lord, please think of the bigger picture. The guard was loyal to Su Fei. Of course, he prioritized Su Fei's interests and safety. In many people's eyes, it was fine if their wives and children died. After all, they could still remarry and have more children. This was what it meant when there was life, there was hope. The guard did not want to give up on the mistress and young master, but they could not let Su Fei take the risk. What bigger picture? Su Fei's breathing was heavy. His eyes were bloodshot, as if they were about to burst out of his eye sockets. The road ahead is bleak, and there are pursuers behind us. This is a situation where we will definitely die. Death is not scary. I cannot let Su Bei see me as a joke. Su Fei's ambition was not as great as the outside world thought. On the contrary, his ambition was rather simple. He could be the head of the Su family and enjoy life without having to do anything. The most important point was, Su Bei had to be more destitute than him. When the two of them competed in power, he had already lost. This was enough to make him feel aggrieved. He could not allow his wife and children to fall into Su Bei's hands. That would make him laugh at himself. Laugh at what? For a man to abandon his wife and children in order to live, wasn't that embarrassing? After all, Su Fei was born into a landowning household. It was true that he cherished his life, but he also cherished his reputation. He was not a shameless person. The guard could not dissuade Su Fei. He sighed and could only regroup before turning around to search. However, they were all separated. How could it be easy to find them? Before Su Fei could find them, the next wave of pursuers met him head-on. When enemies met, their eyes turned red. They did not waste words, but fought. To the pursuers, Su Fei was not only the enemy's lord, but he was also a mobile warrior. The price of his head was very high. Su Fei fought and retreated. It was not easy for him to break out of the encirclement and shake off this wave of pursuers. During this period of delay, the pursuers caught up one after another. He had no time to find them. He could not even figure out the direction and could only run for his life. In the end, he was forced into a desolate village with only 10 families. The guards by his side were also reduced to 2. The 3 of them could only hide in the courtyard of a farmer's house. This farmer's house was considered wealthy in the village. The courtyard was built with stone walls and covered with yellow mud, unlike the other farmers who only had fences. When the villagers heard that there was a war, they fled early. Su Fei's injuries were the lightest. He had only been cut twice. The guards who had risked their lives to protect him were more heavily injured. Half of their bodies were covered in blood. A man entered the farmhouse. After a while, he found a set of men's clothes. He held the clothes with both hands and said, "My lord, please change into this. I will change into your clothes to distract the pursuers. You should take advantage of the situation and blend into the ranks of the refugees. You might still have a chance of survival." Seeing this, Su Fei's eyes were filled with sorrow. He said, "Forget it, you may leave." "Master." The two of them couldn't believe their ears. What did he mean by letting them go? Their pursuers were still rushing over, and they did not know when they would catch up with them. If another wave came, none of them would survive. "I've made up my mind." Su Fei panted and said with a calm expression, "There's no way forward and no way back. If the heavens want me dead, how can I defy the heavens? I was born into the Su family, I was born noble, I have my own pride. If I have to pretend to be a refugee in order to survive and linger on for the rest of my life, I might as well face death. At least he would be able to clear his name. I want to let Su Bei know that I will not lose to him in this aspect." Su Fei gritted his teeth and squeezed out a few words. "I will wait for him at the Yellow Springs Road." Su Bei had tried to kill him. He wanted to see what kind of good ending this person would have. The two guards looked at each other and saw the hot tears welling up in each other's eyes. Feeling helpless, they bowed to Su Fei and left the courtyard. Before leaving, they even closed the courtyard door. Su Fei looked at the green tree in the courtyard. The corners of his lips curled into a helpless sneer. What a coincidence, the place to hang himself was already prepared. Su Fei moved a wooden stool over and untied the decorative silk sash around his waist. He wrapped it twice and hung it on a tree branch with a dead knot. Facing death required a great deal of courage, but Su Fei felt at peace. He stretched his neck over and kicked the stool. There were two sides to the conversation. Su Fei's wives and concubines had been separated from him. It was unknown whether it was due to the guidance of the unseen or something else, but the carriages of his wives and sons were not far from each other. They quickly gathered together. What caused them to despair was that Su Fei's carriage had disappeared. Most of the guards had also disappeared. Although they had dozens of guards by their side, they were not enough to protect them. The concubines felt that Su Fei had abandoned them and wept non-stop. The main wife made a decision and hurried along the planned route while looking for Su Fei. How would the concubines dare to talk back? The dozens of guards who were left behind only listened to their lord and mistress. They were just concubines. Who did they think they were? If they talked back, they might die even faster. Unfortunately, their luck was just that little bit off. After they separated from Su Fei, they attracted the covetous eyes of bandits. These bandits were ruffians who had become bandits nearby. They were originally the water soldiers of Mountain Earn City. Ever since Mountain Earn City fell into a bitter battle and was about to fall, the water soldiers fled more and more in order to survive. They escaped, but food became a problem. They had no money and no rations. They could only take the risk out of desperation and rob houses. Needless to say, this kind of life was wonderful. Each of them lived a free and unfettered life. It was much more comfortable than being a nuisance soldier. One day, they saw a few carriages from afar. The guards protecting the carriages were all injured. The bandits pondered for a while and quickly guessed that the carriages belonged to a wealthy family who escaped from Mountain Earn City. Any item from such a wealthy family was enough for them to eat for a lifetime. Wouldn't it be a pity if they didn't kill a fat fish that came to their doorstep? The guards were well trained and were armed. However, they were few in number and they were all injured. The bandits were numerous and had all kinds of weapons in their hands. There were choppers, saws, hoes, stones, carrying poles, everything that one could think of. As the saying goes, a random punch could kill an experienced master. The bandits quickly gained the upper hand and killed all the remaining guards. "Boss, they are all women," an exclamation was heard from among them. Along with the exclamation, there was also the high-pitched scream of a woman. The faces of the women turned pale. The bandits outside the carriage wanted to poke their heads in, scaring them. Motherf***, each of them is prettier than the last. Look, I'm hard. The thing in front of your chest is so big and soft. It's much better than the girls in the brothel. This skin is so thin and soft. It's hard to pinch, right? A group of boorish men commented on them. When had these women who lived in the backyard ever seen such a scene? These men spoke vulgarly. Listening to them, they had a vague feeling that they were being violated from head to toe. They wanted to kill themselves. What good could they get from falling into the hands of these men? Don't touch my daughter, a man tried to reach out to Su Fei's eldest daughter. The first wife clawed and scratched him like crazy. She opened her mouth and bit his nose. Crazy woman, after being bitten, the man grabbed the first wife's hair and threw her to the side. The back of her head hit the carriage. With a thud, the whole carriage shook. Xiao Er, run, little girl, where can you run to? How could a young girl who lived in the boudoir be a match for an adult man? She was grabbed by the hair and slapped. The force was so strong that half of her face quickly swelled up. The man still refused to stop and lifted her up from the ground. Chapter 11:22. Looking at the carriages filled with beautiful women, the thugs were drooling. They couldn't wait to do it out in the open. They didn't even have a basic sense of shame. Normally, they didn't need to go to the toilet. They just needed to loosen their belts and take out something to pee. Doing the pleasurable things between men and women, using the sky as their blanket and the ground as their bed, was a different kind of excitement. However, they couldn't do it now. Stop, stop. Look at how impatient you guys are. It's as if you haven't slept with a woman in 800 years. The leader of the thugs said, let's find a place to enjoy ourselves. As he spoke, several men had already pounced on one of the concubines and were tearing her clothes to shreds. What are you stopping for? I'm suffocating, the leader of the thugs said. Mountain Earn City can't hold on any longer. If you guys want to be killed halfway, go ahead. They were all water soldiers and were well aware of the unspoken rules of this trade. In order to gain merit and climb up the ranks, many people used the heads of commoners to make up the numbers. The waters of this trade were deep. If they met the water soldiers of Su Bei's army, they wouldn't be merciful. As he said this, the fire burning in their bellies lessened. One by one, they cursed their bad luck. Let's go back first. We'll have fun when we get back. The leader of the thugs laughed and tossed the spoils of war back into the carriage. Mother Xiao Er, the wife of the first wife, disregarded her own sorry state and crawled to her daughter's side. She hugged her in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Su Yanxiao hugged her back and cried in her wife's arms. Mother, my head hurts, she stubbornly refused to make a sound. She only bit her lips until the taste of blood entered her teeth. Her scalp was in so much pain that it was almost numb. She even felt as if a piece of her scalp had been forcefully torn open. The wife of the first wife raised her hand and gently caressed her scalp. Mother and daughter cried like two tearful people. Her husband's whereabouts were unknown and she couldn't even protect herself. She couldn't even protect her daughter. In just half a day, she had tasted pain that she had never experienced in the first half of her life. The wheels of the carriage were still moving forward. Listening to the discussion of the thugs outside, the wife of the first wife's heart gradually sank into an icy abyss. Only the main wife and Su Yanxiao were in this carriage. The concubines were in other carriages. Hearing the faint cries and screams coming from outside, the main wife's tongue felt bitter and she didn't know what to say. Su Fei liked women with good color. She looked ordinary, so naturally, she was not favored. It was only because of her good family background that she could become his legal wife. Concubines were different. After all, they were playthings that men used to enjoy. They were beautiful. Because of this, Su Feina's concubines were all as beautiful as flowers in jade, and when they gathered together, they were pleasing to the eye. In contrast to them, the already ordinary main wife was even more unlikable. These past few years, she had been busy with Su Fei's women in the inner courtyard and had expended too much energy. Today, In order to escape for her life, she did not have time to put on makeup and looked 5 or 6 years older than her actual age. If it weren't for those beautiful concubines, she wouldn't have been able to escape. Don't listen. She raised her hand to cover her daughter's ears, and the tears that had stopped rolling down her cheeks again. The carriage went further and further away, and in the distance, they saw a small village with more than 10 families on the horizon. The official wife's heart sank. She pursed her lips tightly, and her expression was emotionless. "We're here," someone shouted, and the wheels of the carriage slowed down. A few thugs were impatient and directly carried the 2 naked concubines on their shoulders. The loose hair on her temples scattered, making her skin whiter and her black hair darker. Her white flesh was exposed to everyone's eyes. The more the woman struggled, the more parts that could be seen. The thugs' mouths were dry, and their throats kept moving. "Mother. I can't wait," the leader of the thugs snorted in disdain. What's so good about a few women that have been played with? The one that he liked was a fledgling. "Let go of my daughter, Xiao." The leader wanted to touch Su Yanxiao, but how could the official wife agree? This old shrew, the leader of the thugs, kicked the official wife's shoulder and smiled at the other brothers who didn't get a woman. "Although this woman is old, it's still good to cover her head." Su Yanxiao struggled, opened her mouth and bit his ear, then was slapped by him. Both sides of her face were swollen red. This slap used all of his strength, making Su Yanxiao's head feel dizzy, as if all the sounds around her were moving away. What are you shouting about? There's someone hanging here." Opening the door, a man's corpse hanging from a tree was facing them. This person was wearing a luxurious robe, his clothes were stained with someone's blood, his face was dark green, his tongue was sticking out, and his eyes were almost popping out. Someone hanged themselves here? Everyone was startled. The official wife took this opportunity to struggle free. Her eyes were looking at the man's corpse hanging from the tree. With just one look, she knew who this person was. For a moment, a strong sense of grief rose from her chest to her brain. She didn't know where the strength came from, but she broke away from the 2 thugs and hit the wall of the farmhouse. She used a lot of strength, the entire wall shook, and blood spurted out from her forehead. "Mother," Su Yanxiao screamed. The leader of the thugs spat at the female corpse on the ground. "You're really unlucky." Su Yanxiao was very agitated, using both her hands and feet, trying to attack the thug leader. Although it wasn't fatal, it was still very painful. The thug leader was furious and threw her to the ground. "I'll give this girl to you. If you can't play with her mother, you can play with her as your daughter." Su Yanxiao didn't listen to him. She cried and crawled to the official wife's corpse, sobbing, "Mother, look at Xiao." The thugs didn't have sympathy. For them, personal needs were more important than anything else. "This girl is quite fierce." The thugs laughed and teased her, grabbing her shoulders and lifting her up. "Let me go, get out, let me go." At this moment, the gravel on the ground trembled. A low rumbling sound came from afar, getting louder and louder. What's going on? The thugs were so shocked that they stopped. "This is the sound of horse hooves." The thugs who stayed outside the village rushed in, shouting as they ran. "Not good, there are a lot of people outside." The thug leader roared, "Who are they? Are they here for these women?" Su Yanxiao clenched her teeth, took the opportunity to push them away, and jumped to the side. She crawled to her mother's corpse with her hands and feet, hugging the body that was still warm. "Run!" The thug leader looked at the women around him, unwilling to give up. Women were good, but they needed to be alive to enjoy it. Then these women, there were always people who liked to think with their lower body. "If you want to stay, then stay. Don't get in my way." As they spoke, the sound of horse hooves was getting closer. Those with good eyesight could see the color of the horse that the person in front was riding. Su Yanxiao's eyes flashed a hint of fierceness. While the thugs were panicking and trying to escape, she rushed over and hugged the legs of the leader. The man was caught off guard and lost his balance, causing him to tumble down. "If I can't live, you have to die too." Whether they were friend or foe, she couldn't let them escape. Stay and be buried with them. The thug leader quickly reacted, using some strength to break free from Su Yanxiao, and kicked her to the side. Su Yanxiao was a stubborn person, so she endured the pain and climbed up, trying to stop him again. Madman! At this moment, an arrow pierced through the air. The sharp arrow pierced through his brain, causing his body to fall in the opposite direction. General Qin Gong, I'm late to save you. Su Yanxiao's eyes were wide open, hot tears filled her eyes. Chapter 11:23. Perhaps it was the guidance of fate, Su Fei let the two guards leave, which gave Su Yanxiao and the others a chance to live. The two guards knew that Su Fei had made up his mind to die. The two men cried their eyes out, but in order to leave Su Fei with the last shred of dignity, they chose to leave. If they met any pursuers, they could lead them away to prevent their lord's corpse from falling into the hands of the enemy. Both of them were seriously injured, so they could only support each other as they moved forward. After about 2 hours, they could faintly hear the sound of horse hooves. They had not found any traces of the enemy, but the enemy had already found them. The two of them were ready for battle. The scouts who found them did not attack immediately, but maintained a certain distance and shouted from afar. Who's there? Report quickly. The scouts on horseback looked rough, and their attire was unfamiliar. They spoke with a northern accent, and did not look like they were from Zhe County or Hu County. The guards were bewildered, and asked hesitantly, "Who are you?" The scouts looked at each other, exchanged information in a low voice, and made a unanimous decision. While the two of them were unprepared, they threw out the noose. The two of them were seriously injured, and the weapons in their hands were chipped. One look and it was obvious that they had experienced a fierce battle not long ago. Apart from that, they were also wearing finely made armor, which was even more suspicious. A full set of armor, other than the real elite battalion, could only be worn by soldiers above the centurion level. Those below the centurion level could at most wear a breastplate or a piece of leather to protect their vital parts. The water soldiers were even more casual. They wore their own coarse hemp clothes and held sharpened wooden sticks. That was it. As Su Fei's personal guards, the two of them were naturally treated well, and could afford to wear a full set of armor. After being tied up and brought back by the scouts, the two guards were ready to curse, and were shocked to find that there was a familiar face here. Qin, young General Qin. Wasn't this armored, helmet-wearing youth frowning on a horse Qin Gong? Qin Gong also noticed the style of their armor, and quickly got off the horse. He said to the scout, "Quickly let them go." The scout did as he was told, and loosened the noose. The two guards stared blankly at Qin Gong, and then at the large wave of people he had brought with him, a sour feeling spreading through them. It was too late. If it had been half a day earlier, no, if it had been 4 hours earlier, the Lord wouldn't have been driven into a corner and had no choice but to hang herself. Yang Si led the gentle purplish-red horse forward and asked Qin Gong, breaking the strange atmosphere between the three of them. "Lieutenant Qin, these two are?" Qin Gong came back to his senses and briefly said, "These two are the guards of your father." Su Fei's name was Ling Wen, which meant that he was talented in writing. With Qin Gong's current position, he could not address Su Fei as his lord, so he could only change to another form of respect. The two guards noticed that the way Qin Gong addressed Su Fei had changed, but they did not dare to mention it in this situation. Although Qin Gong tried his best to restrain himself, he still asked impatiently, "Do you know where Ling Wengong is now?" The guard's eyes were red, and he couldn't hold back the pain that had accumulated in his heart. He actually burst into tears. As she wept, she said, "My lord has been waiting for you for a long time. Su Bei's army has attacked the mountain-earned city by force. The lord had no choice but to break out of the encirclement." Halfway through, she met with pursuers. My lord, mistress, and the others split up. My lord refused to give up on his wife and daughter. He brought people to search for them, but the number of pursuers increased. In the end, his troops were exhausted. With no way out, my lord could only hang himself in despair. As the guard wept, Qin Gong already had a bad premonition. When he finished, Qin Gong felt even more dizzy. His dry throat seemed to have a strange feeling. He struggled to find a trace of clarity, and his eyes quickly became red and watery. Qin Gong grabbed the guard's shoulder, his fingers trembling as he asked in a hoarse voice. "Where is my lord's body now?" In a moment of desperation, he had forgotten that Yang Si was standing beside him. The guard replied, "Your subordinates still remember the location. We can bring young General Qin there." "Good." Qin Gong suppressed his violent emotions. His right hand gripped his weapon tightly, his knuckles turning from white to green from the force. He mounted the horse and was about to give the order when he suddenly remembered something. "Advisor Yang, this general has a presumptuous request." Yang Si smiled. "Lieutenant Qin, please speak. Your father had 3 sons and 3 daughters, but now they have been separated due to the chaos." Qin Gong was now going to fetch Su Fei's body. If he was late, Su Fei's head might have already been cut off by the soldiers under Su Pei's tent, and he would die without a complete corpse. Qin Gong missed his lord, but he was also concerned about the safety of his old master's family. He could only entrust Yang Si to help find them. He knew that his request would arouse Yang Si's disgust, and even make his new master wary and suspicious of him, but he couldn't care so much. Yang Si said righteously, "Lieutenant Qin, go ahead. I will bring people to find your father's family." Qin Gong nodded heavily and led 2,000 soldiers to find the farmer's village that the guard had mentioned. He didn't dare to stop for even a moment. After galloping for nearly a quarter of an hour, he finally saw the village. From afar, he discovered that this village wasn't uninhabited like the guard had said. There were people who looked like they were on the lookout outside the village. Of course, he didn't doubt the guard's words. He was just worried that these people would harm Su Fei's body. When he got closer, he could faintly see more than 20 thugs. With his excellent eyesight, he even saw the figures of a few women. After thinking for a bit, Qin Gong guessed that these thugs were beasts who took advantage of the chaos to bully and humiliate the people. Those thugs also discovered traces of Qin Gong and the others. They seemed to be making use of this time to escape. Qin Gong snorted coldly. He knocked his bow and shot an arrow, aiming at the head of the thug who was entangled by the young girl. One arrow was shot, and it killed in one shot. In a short period of time, the horse galloped for a distance. It was enough for Qin Gong to clearly see the face of the young girl who dared to fight against the thugs. Both sides of her face were bruised and swollen. Her hair had long been disheveled and scattered over her shoulders. However, her facial features, Qin Gong was shocked. It was as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water from head to toe on the coldest day of the year. His brain and limbs were frozen. Without waiting for the horse to stop, he dismounted and knelt on one knee. "I am Qin Gong. I came late to save you." Su Yanxiao shrunk back, then crawled a few steps in a sorry state. She grabbed onto Qin Gong's arms tightly. However, she could only grab onto the ice-cold scales. Just like her current state of mind, it was so cold that she couldn't feel any warmth. "Qin Fengjing. Why? Why did you only come now?" she cried uncontrollably. Her tears flowed down uncontrollably. In an instant, half of her face was wet. "Why did you only come now?" Qin Gong didn't dare to move. He tried to say something, but when he saw Su Yanxiao's appearance, his throat choked and he couldn't say a word. If it was possible, he also wanted to come 4 hours earlier. His lord didn't have to hang herself, and the person in front of him didn't have to suffer such grievances. Chapter 11:24. Su Yanxiao could still whimper at first, but she suppressed her voice. After a while, she cried uncontrollably until her voice was hoarse. She looked battered and exhausted. She no longer had the demeanor of a noble lady. Anyone could feel her despair and pain from her cries, but Qin Gong could not even give her basic comfort. Qin Gong spurred his horse forward, but the troops following behind him soon arrived. Qing Yuan got off the horse, panting. He glanced at the scene from afar and took out a cloak from the box on the horse's back. Colonel Qin, Qing Yuan handed the cloak to him. Qin Gong came back to his senses and looked up at Qing Yuan. Inspector Cheng? He took the cloak in a daze. He glanced at Su Yanshao and pursed his thin lips. It was not his fault that he was late, but to Qin Gong, it was his fault for not being able to protect his old master's family. He did not dare to get close to Su Yanshao, afraid that he would hurt her. Qin Gong spread the cloak with both hands and covered the body of the first wife. Most of her clothes were made of precious silk. The fabric was comfortable and beautiful, but it could not withstand strong tearing. The thugs were anxious to tear, so how could they take off someone's clothes peacefully? After some pushing and shoving, the clothes on the first wife were almost torn to shreds. Although she had not been physically humiliated before her death, her appearance alone would cause misunderstandings. The first wife was from a noble family and had always paid attention to her personal and family reputation. Qin Gong thought that perhaps First Madam didn't want others to point fingers at her corpse when she was in the netherworld. Qing Yuan entered the farmyard and found a few panicked women in rags. There was also a male corpse hanging from a tree in the yard. This male corpse was Su Fei of the Su family, Qin Gong's old master. Go and put him down. Qing Yuan was not naive, but he had never seen such a bloody scene. Su Fei's face was ashen, and his tongue stuck out from his mouth. Qing Yuan's heart skipped a beat. He turned his face away and ordered the soldiers to carry the corpse down from the tree and put it down properly. They then covered it with a white cloth to preserve its dignity. Lieutenant Qin, we found a male corpse hanging inside. Qin Gong looked at the male corpse being carried out by the soldiers and hesitated for a while. Finally, he stepped forward and slightly lifted a corner of the white cloth. With just one glance, his eyes turned red, and the hostility that had just subsided rose again. Su Bei, Qin Gong's eyes were red as he gritted his teeth and squeezed out these two words. Qing Yuan sighed softly, patted Qin Gong's shoulder, and comforted him. Colonel Qin, my condolences. Ling Wengong's funeral still needs you to take care of, and the wives and concubines he left behind also need someone to take care of them. Now was not the time to wallow in hatred. The dead were gone, and the living were still here. If Ling Wengong knew about this in the afterlife, he would definitely hope that they would be treated well for the rest of their lives. Most of Ling Wengong's old subordinates had already died in battle. Now, only Colonel Qin was left to shoulder this heavy responsibility. If you lose your mind because of hatred, who will take care of these old and weak women and children? Qing Yuan's words were reasonable. Qin Gong could only endure the pain. The army supervisor was right. He couldn't fall yet. At the very least, he had to make arrangements for Duke Wen's family. But before that, Qin Gong glanced in the direction that the thugs had fled and hardened his heart. They had humiliated Ling Wengong's family. This debt must be repaid with blood. Army Supervisor Cheng, Ling Wengong's family has been found, but military advisor Yang still doesn't know. Qing Yuan was considerate. He smiled and said, Colonel Qin, don't worry. I will send someone to send a message to the military advisor. That's good. Thank you, Army Supervisor. Qing Yuan had a good temperament. It was a blessing for the Commander-in-Chief to meet such an easygoing and considerate military supervisor. As the Commander-in-Chief, Qin Gong naturally wouldn't do something like capture the thugs single-handedly. Fortunately, the thugs hadn't run far. How could a two-legged person outrun a four-legged warhorse? In less than a quarter of an hour, the thugs who had just escaped were tied up by the cavalry scouts and thrown onto the ground like a human pyramid. On the other side, Su Yanshao had cried enough. The thugs have all been captured and are at Lady Su's disposal. Qin Gong didn't accompany Su Yanshao. Instead, he went to arrange his troops and make preparations to deal with a fierce battle that could break out at any time. After doing all this, he finally had time to see Su Yanshao. At this moment, she had already stopped crying, but the tear stains on her face were still very obvious. Her eyes were red and swollen like a goldfish. Qin Gong didn't dare to get too close, and his voice was also several degrees softer. Qing Yuan looked at the two of them, his hands in his sleeves, and he couldn't help but laugh. In Yang Xi's words, Qin Gong was usually like a little wild wolf, but now he had his tail between his legs and pretended to be a harmless puppy. He carefully retracted his claws and teeth. That pitiful look, sigh, if he were a girl in the boudoir, he might also be attracted to it. Qing Yuan was amused by the scene in his mind. Yang Xi said, "What are you laughing at? Could it be that you're thinking about some young lady?" Qing Yuan laughed and said, "Sir, don't make fun of me. There are jackals and wolves at home, like wolves and tigers. I don't dare to provoke them." He had only gotten married in recent years. His wife was a distant relative of his mother's family. Qing Yuan hadn't seen what she looked like before they got married, and they only started getting along after they got married. Although it was a blind marriage, the two of them got along well after getting married. Now, they could be considered to be in love and the young couple was quite happy. "Then why were you laughing like that just now?" Qing Yuan said, looking at Lieutenant Qin's matter. "I couldn't help but think of an embarrassing incident that my wife caused." "What embarrassing incident?" "My wife bought a wild wolf cub at the market and mistook it for a puppy. She raised it for a while," Qing Yuan said with a smile. "At that time, she was busy and didn't go home for half a month. When she went back, she saw that wolf cub sweating profusely. She didn't know how big of a joke she had made. Now that I think about it, military advisor Yang, don't you think that Lieutenant Qin looks like that wolf cub pretending to be a puppy?" Yang Xi looked at him seriously and said, "Yes." Both of them had been around Qin Gong's age, so of course they could see Qin Gong's feelings for Su Yanxiao. It was precisely because he cared that he was careful. On the other side, Su Yanxiao looked straight at Qin Gong and asked in a hoarse voice, "You can do whatever you want with them?" Qin Gong said, "Yes, even if you want to dismember them or cut them into pieces, I'm willing to hand you the blade." The corners of Su Yanxiao's mouth twitched stiffly. Her eyes were lifeless, and it was unknown where her gaze fell. "I want to peel their scalps off their skulls one by one." "Are you going to do it too?" Qin Gong said, "Yes. Although it's a delicate and time-consuming job, it's what they deserve." Su Yanxiao's tears, which she had stopped with great difficulty, gushed out again. "What about castrating them?" Qin Gong asked, "Do you want a blunt knife or something sharper?" Su Yanxiao sobbed and buried her face in her knees. She said in a voice so low that it was almost inaudible, "I want to watch." Qin Gong was worried that she would see a bloody scene, but he wouldn't refuse her request. Chapter 1125. Of course, Qin Gong wouldn't let Su Yanxiao do it herself. He couldn't let these thugs disgust her a second time. He let the soldiers do the work. Scalping the dead wasn't a big deal. After all, the body wouldn't move. But scalping a living person and castrating him was very exciting. Coincidentally, the soldier who did it was a butcher before joining the army. He was good at skinning pigs. The thug was scared out of his wits and kept begging for mercy. Seeing that begging for mercy didn't work, he cursed out loud, saying whatever he could. Qin Gong was afraid that the thugs wouldn't listen to him, so he covered their mouths with cloth. The knife-wielding soldier looked at Qin Gong, then looked at the pigs in front of him who were tied up on the pillars to prevent them from moving. He clicked his tongue and gestured where to start with the knife. "Do you want to shave your head first?" he asked his assistant in a low voice. The assistant thought for a while and frowned in disgust. "Just do it. I don't know when was the last time they took a bath. The dandruff and oil on their hair are enough to cook a dish." "Okay. Find a straw rope and tie his hair up. It's hard to find a place to wear it." He used the knife to draw a circle along his hairline. A blood-red chain appeared. Scalping people was cruel. Qin Gong let them do it in the farmyard. Other than the soldier and his assistant, only Su Yanxiao and him were left. "If you feel disgusted, you can go out first. I'll watch for you." A stern expression flashed across Su Yanxiao's immature face as she hoarsely rejected Qin Gong's good intentions. No need. I want to see it with my own eyes. The thugs passed out in pain, but it was convenient for the soldier to do it. At first, he was a bit rusty. Halfway through, he obviously got the feeling and quickly scalped the thugs. When the bloody scalp and hair were placed on a plate in front of Su Yanxiao, she suddenly broke down and laughed hysterically. The soldier asked Qin Gong with his eyes. The scalp was already scalped. Was there a need to castrate him? Qin Gong hugged Su Yanxiao, who was out of control, and answered with his eyes. Castrate. The soldier's legs turned cold. It was a strange feeling to let a butcher castrate another man. He was experienced in skinning. After all, he was a butcher. But castration was difficult. He was not a professional. Thinking of the thug's evil deeds, the soldier could not feel the slightest sympathy. Both of them were people who were about to die, so there was no need to care about anything else. The soldier endured the disgust, pinched the dirty thing under the thug's body with one hand, and held the big knife used to kill people with the other. He pressed it against the root and cut. The thug, who had passed out from the pain, woke up from the pain again. He screamed and passed out again. Bah, caught off guard, the soldier was sprayed all over his body. He threw the food onto the plate in disgust. How dare he show this thing to Commandant Qin? The soldier looked at Qin Gong. Qin Gong looked at him and then at the meat on his plate. He couldn't help but feel disgusted. Feed it to the dogs. The soldier could not help feeling sorry for the stray dogs in the village. Such a dirty thing, even a stray dog would find it smelly, right? After removing one thug, there were still 30 or 40 left. Qin Gong wouldn't let Su Yanxiao look at them one by one. Every time he saw it, he would be stimulated. Wasn't this person stupid? This general promises you that every one of them will meet the same end. I ask Lady Su to prioritize your own health and not to harm yourself. Su Yanxiao was indifferent, so Qin Gong could only bring up her mother. Lady Su will still need to take care of the matriarch's funeral. Can you stand by and watch as she dies? He had learned these words from Cheng Yuan. Although he was suspected of plagiarism, it was fine as long as it worked. To Su Yanxiao, the legal wife was her weakness. Qin Gong coaxed Su Yanxiao away. The soldier holding the knife looked at him silently, his eyes asking, "Should we continue?" Qin Gong gritted his teeth. "Continue. Kill as many as you can. If you can't make it in time, remember to kill them so that they don't waste their lives." With more than 10,000 soldiers stationed here, they were practically moving landmarks. The soldiers sent by Su Bei weren't blind. They would definitely discover them. If there was a need, they would have to carry out a strategic retreat. Time was tight. The soldier received the order. Yes. Apart from Su Yanxiao, Su Fei's concubines had also survived. Each of them was battered and exhausted. Qin Gong didn't have a good impression of them. Moreover, he was a foreign official and had to avoid arousing suspicion. He couldn't get close to his old master's woman. Commandant Qin, the military advisor, has sent this general to inform you that the heirs of Duke Wengong have been found. They had been found, but they weren't alive. Su Fei had 3 sons and 3 daughters. The eldest son was already 9 years old, while the younger one hadn't stopped breastfeeding. In the carriage, the thugs wanted to do something immoral to Su Fei's concubines. The children cried incessantly, angering the thugs. The 9-year-old child was beaten so hard that his sternum was shattered and his lungs were pierced. The youngest child fell to his death. When they found him, his body was in a twisted position. The middle child was thrown off the carriage halfway and died under the wheels of the carriage. The 3 bastard sons were all dead. Apart from Su Yanxiao, the 2 concubine daughters were also on the verge of death. They had been humiliated by the thugs in the carriage and were half dead. After that, they were even beaten viciously. The 2 children didn't wait for the military doctor before they breathed their last. Their little faces turned ashen and deathly still. Yang Si looked at the two young girls and was silent for a while. Although the female soldiers had tidied up and covered up their faces, their dark and twisted faces still dealt a heavy blow to him. Scenes seemed to flash before his eyes. After a while, Yang Si said, "Prepare 2 coffins for them." Dragging Su Fei to death was within his and the Lord's expectations, but Yang Si stopped himself from having dangerous thoughts. He got up and left, striding into the farmyard. The soldier was still hard at work. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. His efficiency was much higher than before. Military advisor. Yang Si laughed. "You do it, I'll watch." The soldier nodded in a daze. Just as Qin Gong had predicted, Su Bei's pursuers had discovered this place. However, they didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. Instead, they sent the news back to the main camp. After Su Bei heard this, he couldn't sit still. Does this mean that Qin Gong has already rescued Su Fei? Thinking about this, Su Bei couldn't help but feel pained. Falling into such a situation, Su Fei was still able to escape from despair and hitch a ride on Zhang Pengji's boat. Was he trying to make things difficult for him? I'm not sure about the specific situation. They had only discovered traces of Qin Gong's troops, but they weren't sure if Su Fei had been rescued by him. Su Bei held his forehead gloomily. Everyone under the tent looked at each other. Someone suggested, "Why don't the Lord send a messenger to test the waters? Wouldn't they know if Su Fei had been rescued by just a little test?" As they spoke, hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Not only was there the sound of armors colliding, but there was also the sound of clothes rubbing against each other. "My lord, military advisor Han requests an audience." Su Bei's eyes lit up. He hurriedly said, "Quickly invite Wenbin in." Realizing that something was wrong, Han Yu rushed to the front lines without stopping. Chapter 1126. Professor Wei, the secondary division's principal's office is calling. Principal? The young man in the creamy white knitted casual shirt raised his head, revealing an enviable and beautiful face. His lips were slightly raised, and the faint smile seemed to dye his lacquered eyes with bright stars. Did he say what it was? He didn't say, but judging from his tone, it doesn't seem to be anything good. Please transfer the call. Okay, please hold on. Intoxicated by the young man's beauty, the assistant was momentarily dazed. He quickly returned to his senses and transferred the call. The young man accepted the call request, and the dark screen suddenly lit up, revealing the face of an unfamiliar middle-aged man. The man was in a suit with a protruding beer belly. His slightly chubby face was filled with impatience as he said something to the young man. After a while, the young man said in a cold tone, "Sorry, I'll be right there." After hanging up the call, he tidied up his desk, picked up his coat from the hanger, and put on a light gray scarf. "Where are you going, Professor Wei?" A colleague who passed by saw him in a hurry, looking at the bus route as he walked, and asked curiously. The young man seemed to be in a difficult position. "The Federation's secondary division, but I don't know which bus to take." The colleague choked on his words. "The secondary division is on the other side of the hemisphere. It'll take at least 4 hours to get there by bus." The Federation's top university was on planet Clemra, and the entire planet had 4 parts. Elementary schools, secondary schools, and advanced schools. The last one was the school district housing, where family members lived during the holidays. The young man had to cross at least half the planet to get to the secondary division from the advanced division. After listening to his colleague, the young man frowned. "I'm going to the secondary division to do something, and the other party only gave me 40 minutes. The colleague said, 40 minutes, there's no rush in this world. The young man looked at his colleague quietly. The other party only gave him 40 minutes, but it would take him 4 hours to get there by bus. Was this not a rush? The colleague was also confused. He said, "I saw you driving a Silver Wind Thunder X6 earlier, and it's a limited edition Silver Deluxe edition." According to the official data, it would take you at most 20 minutes to get to the secondary division from here. With this, why would you take the bus? The normal edition cost tens of millions, and this special edition cost at least 100 million. The price was secondary. The key was that this kind of limited edition was only available to certain people. It could not be bought without some social status. Ever since the young man drove this car to work, many young teaching assistants became even more enthusiastic towards him. He could even afford a sports car worth hundreds of millions, but this young man actually liked to take public transport. Sure enough, poverty limited his imagination. The youth said, "I don't have a driver's license, so I can't drive." Previously, it was in autopilot mode, but this mode has a speed limit. With the autopilot mode activated, the speed of the sports car would be limited to the minimum, and it would be able to drive according to the predetermined route without a driver. Her colleague had an idea and suggested, "I have a driver's license. I'll take you there." The young man smiled apologetically. "Then I'll have to trouble you." His colleague looked calm on the surface, but he was wild with joy in his heart. A limited edition sports car worth hundreds of millions. He had only seen it on the virtual network and had never touched it. After driving it for a bit, he found that the car's performance was far more terrifying than the official data. His colleague immediately thought of modifying it. "Have you modified your sports car?" The hover sports car steadily stopped at the parking lot, and the young man prepared to get off. "My wife modified it. She's quite interested in it." His colleague was speechless. Didn't the officials say that the limited edition Silver Tempest X6 is infinitely close to the military's tank configuration? The young man smiled. "I'm not sure about that. She said that the original car was too fragile and had poor defense, so she modified it to be thicker." His colleague looked speechlessly at the Silver Tempest X6 in front of him. The perfect lines of the car made people fall in love at first sight. The reason for the modification was actually poor defense? Could it be that the young man was the son of a high-ranking official? His colleague was secretly puzzled. The young man did not understand the secondary division at all. Without his colleague's help, he would not have been able to find his destination. The verification procedures in the principal's office were a little troublesome. Without his colleague's help, the young man would probably be obstructed for a while. "I really don't know which planet you came from before. You don't even know how to use these basic instruments," his colleague muttered in a low voice. The young man smiled gently. Not only was he not angry, but he also studied seriously. After entering the office, the principal's words reached their ears. "Wait, Song, your parents aren't here yet?" The young man heard his mischievous son snort unhappily. "I'm sorry, Mr. Principal, I'm late." The young man smiled faintly. "May I know what mistake my son made?" He spoke in a genteel manner, but because he was a professor of ancient culture who specialized in ancient history, no one said anything. "You are?" The principal looked at the young man and asked, "You're Wei Tsong's father?" Based on appearance alone, the young man and Wei Tsong were indeed somewhat similar. He looked more like an elder brother than a father. The young man nodded and asked honestly, "Yes, do I need to show my paternity certificate?" The principal's smile froze and he said stiffly, "No need." His colleague was flustered. The mysterious professor of the Federation's top institution of higher learning, married with a child? Suddenly, this colleague felt that there was hope for him to get out of singlehood. Now that the young man was married, wouldn't Yen Yen, who had a crush on him, give up? Just as he was thinking, the couple standing at the side interrupted. "You're this child's father?" Their attitude was a little rude and unreasonable, and their faces were angry. The young man gently raised his hand and patted his bratty son, who had just reached his shoulder. He was not angry at the couple's attitude at all. He was unbelievably gentle. "Yes, I'm his father. The principal didn't explain in detail just now, so I don't know what happened." The two of them sized up the young man. The young man was dressed very casually. All of them were ordinary brands with affordable prices. However, he had a good temperament, so his clothes exuded the air of luxury. I hope you can educate your son well. His conduct is not worthy of studying at the top institution of higher learning in the Federation. The man opposite him glanced at Wei Tsong contemptuously and said, stealing is a very despicable act. Refusing to admit it is even more unforgivable. The principal added, if this matter is true, Wei Tsong will be criticized by the entire school and punished with expulsion. A trace of surprise flashed in the young man's eyes as he looked down at his son, who had just entered puberty. Although this child was a little bratty, he would not do such a thing. What happened? I don't know either. That kid snatched my mecha model for no reason and even accused me of stealing. Wei Tsong was very angry, but his father's many years of guidance allowed him to suppress the anger surging in his heart. Why would the top institution hire a liar who's full of lies? The young man frowned slightly and said indifferently, I believe my son's words. He wouldn't do such a thing. Everything requires evidence. If Mr. Principal or this couple can produce concrete evidence, such as stealing surveillance footage, I will personally educate them. The man said, that's impossible, because the theft happened in the bathroom of the training cabin. That's a surveillance blind spot. The young man laughed and said, if that's the case, how can you be sure that my son stole some mecha model? The man was enraged as well. Before he could speak, the young man who had shrunk to the side spoke up, mumbling, that mech model is the latest limited edition model. My dad pulled some strings and spent over 5 million to buy it. Other than the difference in scale, every function is modeled after a real battle mecha. There's even a unique code on it. I lost the model, and Wei Tsong obtained a model with the same code. Although there was no surveillance footage, was there a need to guess? Wei Tsong laughed angrily. You're twisting words and forcing logic. You're slandering me without evidence. You're going too far. The young man said, are you going to say that your family bought the mecha model in your hand? Wei Tsong suppressed his anger. So what if it is? A person who can afford a mecha that costs over 5 million credits is wearing a t-shirt that costs over 200 credits? You're discriminating too much. What's wearing a t-shirt that costs over 200 credits to you? You're just a commoner. With your family's situation, you probably can barely afford the tuition fees, right? Wei Tsong could not hold back his temper and took a step forward. The young man raised his hand and placed it on his shoulder, pulling him back. Wei Tsong, who had been raging just a moment ago, was now extremely obedient. The young man said, what's with the model? Wei Tsong shrunk his neck and whispered, isn't it about to start the mecha course? It's still a few years before I can really learn how to pilot, so I secretly asked my sister for help. Who knew that I'd just received the goods today, and not long after I played with them, this guy would go crazy and say that I stole his stuff. He was being wronged. The young man sneered. You said your sister bought it for you? Let your sister come over and confront us, Wei Tsong said. Are you stupid? Wait for my sister to come over. Why are you so thick-skinned? The young man was furious. There must be some misunderstanding in this matter. Seeing the two teenagers quarreling over this, the young man frowned unhappily. What misunderstanding can there be? The school doesn't accept people with a criminal record of theft. Wei Tsong, it's better to call your mother over and settle the withdrawal procedures together. The young man snorted. I can settle this privately. If you voluntarily withdraw from school, this matter won't be recorded in your file. How about that? The young man did not go overboard. Although Wei Tsong stole his favorite model, he could let bygones be bygones now that the item was back. Wei Tsong was just a commoner student. If he was recorded in the secondary department of the best university, he would not be able to find a job in the future. What's the model number? I'll ask Yen and find out what's going on. 2012 XSD 3611, the same model as WarGod 1253G. The young man glanced at Wei Tsong's father. He was not as angry as he was at first because of his good looks. Since Wei Tsong said his sister bought it, there must be a receipt, right? If you can produce evidence to prove that the model in his hand is indeed his, then I can apologize to him. Although he said that, He did not believe that Wei Tsong could produce evidence. The young man noted it down and opened his communicator to send a message to his daughter. After a while, the message came back. Mom threw it to me a few days ago. I gave it to Tsong in passing. Where did the receipt come from? The young man secretly had a headache. He pulled up his wife's contact avatar and roughly explained the current situation. He replied instantly, "What the hell? Tsong stole?" Wait a minute. After a while, someone's communicator rang. Everyone looked at each other. The principal nodded apologetically in slight embarrassment. It was an unfamiliar video call request. Seeing this, the young man said, "Mr. Principal, you can answer it. If I'm not mistaken, it should be my wife." What the hell? The principal agreed to the video call in surprise. Because it was a three-dimensional communication, the person would not appear on a two-dimensional plane. Instead, it would be directly projected into a three-dimensional image. "Hello, Mr. Principal." As soon as the person spoke, everyone in the principal's office was silent. Hello, Jiang, well, I'm in a bit of a hurry. Let's cut to the chase and get straight to the point. Jiang Pengji said, "I just heard from my husband that my son stole. The evidence is true, so it's very likely that he will be expelled from the school. He might even be recorded." Is this true? The principal was stunned. Not only him, but everyone else was also stunned. They could understand every word the chief said, but when combined into one sentence, they could not understand it. Evidence is important when doing things. Is there a surveillance camera or a witness? The principal blushed and said with difficulty, "No." Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. "Since there is no evidence, why did you say that Song stole?" The principal glanced at the young man's parents. Their expressions were very interesting, like a broken palette. Faced with the questioning of the chief, the principal did not dare to be vague, not to mention that the chief was the most difficult old hooligan to deal with. The principal explained the reason rather awkwardly. Although it was beautified, it could not hide from Jiang Pengji's eyes. "I think the atmosphere of the top school should be changed. The school is a place for students to seek knowledge. How can there be class discrimination? If this matter is broadcasted by the military media or the civilian media, I think the top school will be on the hot search list for a few days." The principal choked and was speechless. Could this kind of thing be linked to discrimination? The school was already relatively fair. The teaching resources they could provide could also be enjoyed by children from ordinary backgrounds, but children from wealthy families could enjoy more top-notch resources. These resources could not even be provided by the school, let alone for ordinary children. For example, the simulated mecha this time. This kind of mecha model was not a toy on the market. Other than the scale and weapon power, everything else was made according to real war mecha. Even if you had money, you could not buy it. Children with power and money could learn in advance, but could ordinary children? "Chief, there must be a misunderstanding in this matter." "Of course I know there's a misunderstanding." Jiang Pengji smiled. Song would not steal a classmate's mecha model, and he does not have a hobby of stealing. There is no doubt about this. Because the mecha model was made according to my former ride, the manufacturer gave me 2 sets as souvenirs. There is no possibility of it being fake. I have already contacted the manufacturer to investigate the serial number, and various certificates can prove that the one in my hands is real. I have a rude suggestion, you'd better check if the lost mecha model is a high-quality imitation. The principal only felt his cheeks blush. The youth's parents could not help but suspect that they had bought a high-quality imitation at a high price. After all, it was impossible for a dignified chief to buy a high-quality imitation from official channels. "I'm sorry, Chief, this is my fault. I did not investigate in detail and wrongly accused young Master Wei." The youth's father could not help but speak up, trying to save some face. "Regarding the lost mecha model, I will investigate carefully. I will not wrongly accuse anyone." Jiang Pengji smiled. "It's okay. It's good that this matter has been resolved. Wei Song could not hold it in any longer. Just a series of apologies was enough? He had been wrongly accused for a few hours. The teachers and principal took turns to meet him, and all of them accused him of stealing. Hadn't he just insulted him with his eyes and nose, mocking him for wearing a cheap t-shirt that cost 200 credits? Although Tsong is young, he is still a young man. This gentleman should be able to understand what it's like to have a bratty son with strong self-esteem at home. Jiang Pengji seemed to sense Wei Tsong's resentment and added with a smile. The gentleman immediately understood. Of course I can understand. After this matter is investigated, I will solemnly apologize to young Master Wei and compensate for the mental damage. Wei Tsong was still a little angry, but after a few snorts, he wilted. He lowered his head and secretly rejoiced. He was satisfied that his mother could take time out of her busy schedule to help him solve a trivial matter. The matter was not complicated, but before Jiang Pengji revealed her identity, Wei Tsong was determined to be a commoner student. A commoner student holding a mecha model worth more than 5 million would make any normal person think that it was of unknown origin. The other party's attitude was more rude and unreasonable. They insisted on their own judgment, so Wei Tsong was naturally at a disadvantage. Now that the positions were reversed, the previously arrogant person could not be arrogant anymore. After careful investigation, they finally found the lost mecha model. After the manufacturer's appraisal, the lost model was indeed a high-quality imitation. The one in Wei Tsong's hand was the real one. The youth apologized to Wei Tsong accompanied by his parents. "You're the son of His Excellency the Commander?" The youth was still very confused. "Yes, is it strange? Then why are you dressed so shabbily? Which proper young master would dress so intimately?" Wei Tsong choked and retorted, "My dad likes to shop online." "Not happy? I can also wear a shabby t-shirt like this, okay?" The youth was embarrassed and ashamed. Fortunately, Wei Tsong did not pursue the matter for revenge, so they were in peace. On the other side, the youth's colleague was dumbstruck and could not react for a long time. The mysterious professor who usually did not bat an eyelid was actually the man of the infamous commander? The flowers in the school who coveted the youth. Did these people know who their love rivals were? "You and His Excellency the Commander are," the youth laughed. "We are husband and wife." "A secret marriage?" "No, but she and I don't like to receive too much attention from the outside world, not to mention that our child is still young." The colleague was already speechless. "That sports car, she bought it for me to travel to work. Tsong's temperament is a bit awkward and he's in puberty. I'm worried about him, so I followed him to Klemla so that it's convenient to take care of him." The youth smiled and squinted his eyes. "Don't tell anyone about this. She's been in a bad mood lately because I've been paying too much attention to Tsong and neglected her. If there are any related reports, I'm afraid she'll cause trouble." The corner of the colleague's mouth twitched. He'd be crazy to spread gossip about the commander. "I definitely won't." There was no need to mention how uncomfortable it felt to have a secret that others did not know. The matter seemed to have been resolved, but not long after, the principal was demoted. He issued a series of documents to rectify the school's atmosphere. The group of students' parents was baffled. Only the person involved knew the inside story. 6 years later, Wei Tsong finished his secondary and higher school courses and graduated a few years ahead of schedule. At the graduation ceremony, the commander of the 7th Army, Her Excellency Jiang Pengji, attended as a special guest and awarded the graduation certificates to the student representatives. After the formal award of certificates, there were other entertainment programs. Jiang Pengji got off the stage and said to Wei Tsong, "Well done." Wei Tsong straightened his chest. "I'm a little biased towards certain subjects. Combat subjects barely hold me back. I don't recommend you to enter the combat ranks. Consider a civilian position." Wei Tsong's face drooped. "Your sister already gave you a handicap of 9 fingers, but you still couldn't beat her. If you join the battle, you'll just be sending yourself to the enemy." Wei Tsong immediately looked like a frostbitten eggplant. He was completely drained of energy. How do you know I can't do it if you don't try? The headmaster of the advanced department was dumbfounded as he listened to their conversation. Seeing Wei Tsong contradict Jiang Pengji, he tried to smooth things over by apologizing to Jiang Pengji on Wei Tsong's behalf. Army commander, this, Jiang Pengji said good-naturedly, Tsong is throwing a tantrum. I've made a fool of myself in front of the principal. Tsong? Wasn't that a little too intimate? The principal of the advanced department was dumbfounded. Wei Tsong is His Excellency's relative? The conversation between the two was broadcasted to the virtual network. Because it was a routine graduation broadcast every year, there weren't many viewers at the beginning. It was a cliché. It was the same routine every year. It was annoying to watch too much. However, the more the audience listened, the more they felt that something was wrong. Their thoughts were perfectly synchronized with the principal's. My son, Jiang Pengji said. Oh, so it's His Excellency's son. As the principal spoke, his expression froze. Son? The audience watching the live broadcast also exploded. The army commander's son? That wasn't right. When did she get married? Who was she marrying? Everyone had the same question. As if to answer their doubts, an extremely good-looking young man entered the range of the camera. Dad, I'm here. As soon as Wei Tsong opened his mouth, the bullet screen exploded. Don't push me, let me see who the father of the 7th Army's crown prince is. Oh my God, my goddess is actually married. Her child is about to enlist in the army. Are you kidding me? This year's media can't do it. Upstairs, are you stupid? Even if you gave those paparazzi 10 million heads, they wouldn't dare to follow and secretly take pictures of the big shots in the military, right? The crown prince is so good-looking. He's so good-looking. The boss's man is good-looking too. I don't think he's had plastic surgery. Oh my God, Jiang Pengji, this scourge, is finally single. Can I find a lady in the army who's willing to let me take over? The bullet screen audience quickly attracted the attention of others when they called the army commander's name directly. But in the next second, he deleted the bullet screen and continued to lurk. Cheering for the army commander. He's the army commander now. When the next marshal election is held, he'll be the marshal, right? That's for sure. The current army commanders are either too old or too inexperienced. None of them can fight. He's the army commander's man now. He'll be the marshal's man in the future. Did this man save the human alliance in his previous life? Looking at the boss's resume, she really has a cheat life. Speaking of which, her surname is Jiang, TSK. I can't help but think of a certain family. I also think of a certain family, yes, I have the same feeling, a certain unspeakable family. You guys are so weird. Our army commander came up on his own. There are many people with the surname Jiang in the world. What are you jealous of? Not long after, the bullet screen was quickly cleared. Regardless of the media's trending topics, Jiang Pengji looked in the direction of the young man with a smile. Chapter 11:27. After much anticipation, Han Yu had finally arrived. However, when he saw Han Yu in person, Su Bei felt guilty for no reason. Greetings, my lord. Han Yu cupped his hands in front of his chest. The atmosphere in the tent dropped to a freezing point. Everyone could tell that Han Yu was in a terrible mood. Su Bei helped Han Yu up and said earnestly, Wenbin, you really made me wait. It is my fault that I failed to solve your problems for you. I do not dare to accept your highness's kindness. Han Yu's face was cold and his voice was stiff. Those who knew him well knew that he was angry. Su Bei happened to be that familiar person. Wenbin is so angry. You must be angry with me. Su Bei said embarrassedly, no matter what, you should at least let me know what I did wrong. A traitor would be sentenced to death if no reason was given. Prisoners on death row also had human rights. Everyone makes mistakes. Han Yu spoke. Su Bei secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Before he could relax, Han Yu continued, however, the mistakes of the Lord can still be forgiven. The mistakes of the advisor cannot be forgiven. The advisor did not fulfill his duty and did not think about remonstrating. Isn't that a dereliction of duty? Allowing the Lord to go astray is adding to the mistakes and crimes on top of the crimes. I have made a mistake. Please punish me, my Lord. I will not complain. If they didn't listen to the last sentence, Han Yu was clearly dissing all the advisors in the tent. He changed the topic and put all the blame on himself. The other advisors were speechless. The feeling of wanting to vomit blood and choking on his lungs was unbearable. Everyone knew that Han Yu was dissing them by name, but they couldn't refute him. After all, he was the one who said he was wrong. Why would an outsider take the blame? Was he thinking too highly of himself? Su Bei blushed. He didn't care what mistakes he had made. The most important thing was to pacify Han Yu first. Since he had already lowered his head and admitted his mistakes, Han Yu naturally couldn't hold on to it. He gave Su Bei a way out. An official relied on the Lord's trust and favor to be arrogant. This wasn't having a backbone, it was called having a problem. Su Bei said, "Fortunately, Wenbin is here. I feel at ease now." Every lord was proficient in the art of sweet-talking. Her methods of coaxing people were profound and numerous, like a sow wearing a bra, one set after another. Jianghu. That was a special case. Her words of love had a unique attribute, and it was bound to be picked up. I've been rushing all the way here, but the information I've received is not detailed. But there's one thing. Han Yu paused and said bluntly, I think you've been a little reckless in your actions, and you've lost your composure as a master. Lu Shi borrowed troops to support Su Fei. Why did Lord send troops to help Lu Shi? Su Pei was dumbfounded. When did he help Lu Shi? Why does Wenbin say that? Han Yu said, Lu Shi saved Su Fei. My lord, just let him save her. Aren't you helping Lu Shi by forcing Mountain Urn City to fall? Su Bei almost couldn't breathe. There was something wrong with this logic. Han Yu continued to analyze, Su Fei is not a good person. Lu Shi saved him, but he saved a hot potato. My lord, if you stop at the right time, you will be able to fulfill your brotherhood with Su Fei. This will prevent people from saying that my lord is heartless. The internal strife between brothers is, after all, a family matter. Lu Shi helped, but my lord didn't intend to kill Su Fei. Her actions will be labeled as a vile person who instigated strife between brothers. My lord can even write a declaration of war against Lu Shi, which is a righteous cause. If Lu Shi were to send troops, it would be a nameless army, and it would be no different to morale. But now, my lord has disregarded our brotherhood and attacked Mountain Urn City by force. You can't escape the label of heartless. War was a must, but there was a big difference between sending troops with a good reason and sending troops without a good reason. Su Bei's actions of attacking Mountain Urn City by force had handed over the initiative to start the war. He could only hope that Su Fei was fine. Otherwise, Su Bei would be slandered by the treacherous old hooligan Lu Shi and be labeled as a murderer. Internal strife between brothers was not uncommon, but it was rare for bloodshed to occur. The Dongqing royal family's nest of weirdos didn't count. Su Bei felt that Han Yu's words were somewhat familiar, as if he had heard them somewhere before. He glanced around the military tent and saw Ching Sun sitting upright on the mat. He couldn't help but feel remorseful. Does Wenbin have a plan to break out of this situation? Su Bei was obedient and humbly asked for advice. Han Yu said, if my lord can shake hands with Su Fei and treat him well, this situation will collapse on its own. Shake hands and make peace. Su Bei's expression stiffened. This request was really too much. He would rather fight with Su Fei for another 300 rounds. When 1,000 people are of one heart, they can gain the strength of 1,000 people. When 10,000 people are not of one heart, none of them will work alone. My lord and Su Fei are from the same faction, and both of them are of the same lineage. If they can let go of their former enmity and help each other hand in hand, with the two of them working together as one, why worry about the hegemony? The Su family won't prosper. Han Yu wouldn't have said these words in the past. It would have been useless even if he had said it. The two brothers were like cross-eyed men. Which one could he persuade? Now that my lord's power had crushed Su Fei and pushed him to the bottom of the valley, there was a possibility for both sides to forcefully cooperate. If he could solve the current situation of the Su brothers being at loggerheads and end the internal strife of the Su family, it would be a blessing in disguise. Thinking of this, Han Yu really wanted to greet the grandfather of the Su brothers. It was one thing to be biased, but to cause fratricide and internal strife in the family because of it was biased, this was a completely different matter. Su Bei felt awkward for a while, but he couldn't just reject Han Yu's suggestion. He could only use the tactic of delaying to send Han Yu away first, and then he could go back to his nest to think about the gains and losses. Unexpectedly, before Su Bei could decide whether or not to bury the hatchet with Su Fei, a sudden piece of bad news came. Su Fei is gone. Su Bei's eyes widened in shock. His right hand gripped the messenger's shoulder tightly and he cried out, "What did you say? Who's dead?" Su. The messenger's heart was filled with anxiety. Seeing that Su Bei's attitude was not right, he corrected himself, "Your lord is dead." "How did he die?" Su Bei seemed to be unable to accept it. The messenger replied, "He hanged himself." Han Yu's expression changed drastically. If he was killed, he could still say that someone's soldiers killed him by mistake and manipulate public opinion to wash away the stain on his name. But if he hanged himself, it would mean that he was forced into a hopeless situation and begged for death. It was obvious who forced him to do it. Han Yu was overwhelmed with shock, but his mind was exceptionally clear. Not only did he have to worry about Jiang Pengji's soldiers, but he also had to worry about Jiang Pengji's slander. "Where's the corpse?" Su Bei asked. The messenger replied, "Your lord's corpse has been collected by his eldest daughter." Su Bei heaved a sigh of relief, but Han Yu, who was at the side, was frightened out of his wits. If the father hanged himself, the person who collected the corpse should not be his wife or son. Why was it his eldest daughter? Unless, as he was thinking, the messenger's voice came from outside. "Report. There's a messenger outside the camp requesting an audience." Su Bei said, "Let him in." Qing Yuan volunteered to be the messenger and went to Su Bei's camp. Yang Si felt that it was too dangerous, but Qing Yuan made him relent with one sentence. "When two armies are at war, Su Bei is not the lord if the messenger is not executed." Chapter 11:28. Qing Yuan's guards were all blocked outside the tent. He did not panic when he saw them. Instead, he smiled faintly and walked into the main tent alone. Looking at his appearance, he wore a dark-colored wide-sleeved crane cloak with a jade pendant hanging from his waist. His clothes fluttered elegantly in the wind. The corners of his eyes were slightly raised. His brows carried the vigor of a young man, but there was no lack of steadiness. Seeing Su Bei sitting on the seat of honor, he calmly bowed in greeting. "Your humble servant, Qing Yuan, greets Duke Xinzhao on the orders of my army's commander." Su Bei, courtesy named Xinzhao. Now that the world was in chaos, the official positions of the feudal lords were meaningless. Jiang Pengji was still the governor of Wanzhou, but which governor could conquer the northern borderline? Not only did he cripple the northern borderline, but he also occupied their territory. Su Bei was the governor of Zhe County, but his territory was not limited to just Zhe County. There was also Hu County and half of Jianghu. The royal family was extinct. As one of the 5 countries, Dongqing had been destroyed in name and in reality. Since the country was gone, many titles naturally had to be changed accordingly. For example, Qing Yuan respectfully addressed Su Bei as Duke Xinzhao, which made him feel very comfortable. Of course, he could also address him as Duke Su, but that would violate the ancestors' taboo. As a descendant, he could not offend the ancestors. Su Bei's expression softened. He smiled and tried to sound Qing Yuan out. Although Qing Yuan was young, and his innate talent was not as frightening as those evildoers, he was still someone who had experienced several years of high-intensity work. He was someone who could handle various strategists with ease. Su Bei's probing had been subtly leveraged by him, and he had unknowingly taken control of the rhythm of the conversation. A few words of greeting were exchanged like a few rounds of swords and knives. Seeing that his probing had failed, Su Bei switched to playing the emotional card. He reminisced about the past at Huangshui with a face full of emotion and was concerned about Jiang Pengji's current situation. Qing Yuan dealt with them one by one, avoiding the small hole that Su Bei had dug. Sometimes, the enemy's concern was not necessarily concern. It could very well be a big trap. The officials should keep the Lord's health condition a secret and not reveal it easily. Even more so, they could not let the enemy know the truth. Qing Yuan's responses were watertight. Su Bei did not gain any advantage. After a while, Su Bei knew that he could not pry open Qing Yuan's mouth. He could only dispel the thought that he should not have. He looked at Han Yu, who gave him a wink. Su Bei understood and went straight to the point. "You didn't come here just to greet me, did you?" Qing Yuan pretended to be annoyed and raised his hand to pat his forehead. He blamed himself and said, "Please forgive me, Duke Xian Zhao. I was a little dazed when I saw you treating me so kindly just now. I forgot why I came and almost delayed the important matter. Other than greetings, I also have a letter for Duke Xinzhao." Su Bei resisted the urge to twitch the corners of his mouth. However, he maintained a candid expression and said, "It's all right. It's all right. Teacher and I hit it off the moment we met, and we had a pleasant conversation. If someone were to be blamed, it would be my fault." "How could I blame sir? Who wrote this letter?" Vaguely, Su Bei felt that this letter was Qing Yuan's true motive for this diplomatic mission. After talking nonsense for so long, it was finally time for the main course. In other words, the warm-up was over. Was it finally time to reveal the dagger? Qing Yuan looked at Su Bei with a smile that was not a smile. "The person who wrote this letter was your Lord Wen. Ling Wengong? Su Fei?" Su Bei was also a man of superb acting skills. His reflexes were breathtaking. Upon hearing the name Su Fei from Qing Yuan, Su Bei's eyes immediately reddened, as if he had recalled a sad past. When an elder brother heard that his younger brother had died in the prime of his life, anyone with feelings for him would definitely feel terrible. I heard that Ling Wengong has already passed away." Su Bei's voice was hoarse, and he seemed to be choking with emotion. Qing Yuan sighed. "Ling Wengong, he used silk as a piece of white silk and hung it on a large tree in a farmer's courtyard. He then stepped on a stool and hung himself. He committed suicide." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Bei burst into tears, calling out Su Fei's name. Many people were infected by his sorrow, and their eyes silently reddened. Su Bei wept bitterly as he said, "Ling Wengong and I were as close as brothers. The scene of us studying together in the past is still vivid in my mind. At the poetry gathering, we held hands and traveled together. Along the winding stream, we drank wine together. We were originally of the same clan. Although there was discord, it was not to this extent." No matter who it was, upon seeing Su Bei's heartfelt weeping, even if one's heart was made of iron, they would still melt. Qing Yuan's face revealed a look of sympathy, but no one knew what he was thinking in his heart. Duke Xian Zhao and Ling Wengong had a deep brotherly relationship. Now that he has passed away, I hope that Duke Xian Zhao will not be too sad. The other officials under Su Bei's tent also consoled him. Only then did Su Bei stop crying and restrain the grief on his face. He asked Qing Yuan, "Did teacher bring Ling Wengong's will?" Qing Yuan retrieved a letter from his bosom. Han Yu took the letter and passed it to Su Bei. Su Bei hurriedly opened it, but there was only a piece of bamboo paper stamped with Su Fei's personal seal. Apart from the seal, there was not even a stain on this piece of paper, not to mention a single word. "Emissary, what is the meaning of this?" Su Bei changed the way he addressed Han Yu. His tone carried a hint of anger. Qing Yuan bowed unhurriedly and said mournfully, Ling Wengong is now extinct. Extinct? Su Bei was enraged. How could Ling Wengong be extinct? He had a large number of children, with 3 sons and 3 daughters still alive. How could he be extinct? Han Yu felt a chill in his heart. His previous conjecture had been confirmed. Qing Yuan said, the Barbican city was breached, and the pursuing soldiers were like an inescapable net. Ling Wengong broke out of the siege several times and was accidentally separated from his wife and children. In order to find his wife and children, he had no choice but to turn back. Not only did he fail to find his wife and children, but he also encountered several waves of pursuing soldiers. After a fierce battle, only 2 guards were left. There were pursuers behind, and there was no way out. Ling Wengong had no choice but to hang himself. Su Bei subconsciously wanted to stop Qing Yuan, but he knew that if he berated him, he would be admitting to the bad reputation of forcing his own brother to his death. Qing Yuan continued, Ling Wengong's wife and children were also unfortunate. After they were separated from Ling Wengong, they unfortunately encountered bandits and villains. The villainous tycoon killed 3 innocent children, ending Ling Wengong's bloodline. The 2 concubine-born daughters also died young. Fortunately, Ling Wengong's wife protected them with her life, delaying time until the arrival of the main army. She was able to preserve her only bloodline. 3 sons and 3 daughters. 5 of them died. The sons who could carry on the bloodline were all dead, leaving only 1 daughter. Wasn't this the end of the line? Qing Yuan calmly stated his intentions. Ling Wengong's daughter grieves over her deceased father's desolate state. She boldly borrowed her deceased father's name to ask Duke Xinzhao for an heir to continue the bloodline of the second branch of the Su family. If there were no filial sons, Ling Wengong would not be able to sleep peacefully in the afterlife. Su Bei's eyes widened in shock. He finally understood what was going on with the will in his hands. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It also contained the lives of Su Fei's entire family. Su Bei glared at Qing Yuan, as if he wanted to chew his flesh off. His eyes were filled with a strong murderous intent. Qing Yuan was neither sad nor happy. He was like a hermit who had nothing to do with this matter, coldly observing the various expressions of the crowd. Chapter 1129. If one ignored the fact that Su Bei had breached Shanwan City and forced Su Fei to his death, how many people would be moved by his words? His cousin's family had only 1 orphan daughter left, and Su Bei had helped out and raised her. What a good person. Su Bei had no choice but to do so. Qing Yuan had stabbed him twice, and he couldn't retaliate. Naturally, he had to think of a way to salvage the situation. Su Yanxiao was already 11 years old this year. If she was raised well for 2 years and married into a good family, Su Bei's infamy as a murderer would lessen. After all, who would treat their brother's daughter well and love her as if she was their own daughter after killing their brother? When it came to public opinion, if one manipulated it well, one could turn black into white. It all depended on one's mouth. Qing Yuan smiled helplessly. I can't decide on this matter alone. I need to ask for Mrs. Su's opinion. Su Bei's expression was ugly as he smiled in agreement. Of course. Qing Yuan had mercilessly toyed with Su Bei. This had already made him want to kill him, but he suppressed it in the end. When 2 armies fought, they didn't kill the envoys. The war hadn't officially started yet. If they casually killed the envoys, things would get even more out of hand. Even though Su Bei was fuming, Qing Yuan still came and left in one piece. Before he left, Qing Yuan nodded slightly in a certain direction with a faint smile on his lips. Unlike the perfect and proper expression he had when facing Su Bei, this smile was more sincere and warm. After Qing Yuan left, the tent fell silent. The officials didn't dare to make a sound, afraid of provoking bad luck. In order to ease the atmosphere and regain some face, Su Bei praised Qing Yuan against his will. He sighed. I don't know how Lu Shi managed to recruit so many young talents. That envoy just now wasn't simple. Qing Yuan had pointed at the mulberry tree and scolded the locust tree at the locust tree. He had tried to force him to give his son to a dead person, but he was still magnanimous enough to forgive him. Not only was he not angry, he even praised him. It could be seen how broad-minded he was. Just as Su Bei had thought, his actions had indeed earned him a good impression of him. Han Yu said, Qing Yuan. You remembers where I've heard of him before. Strategists were a bunch of monsters. Their memory was terrifyingly good. Han Yu quickly found the relevant memories. Before Han Yu could speak, Qing Sun took the initiative to confess. The military advisor has an outstanding memory. Qing Yuan is Sun's second brother. Being exposed by others and confessing by oneself were different in sequence, and the results were also different. If it was the former, it would inevitably arouse the suspicion of those in power and put them in a passive position. If it was the latter, it would appear that he was magnanimous and would eliminate the Lord's suspicion. Qing Sun was a smart person. He naturally knew what was best for him. Han Yu said, yes, I heard Gong Luo mention it before. Patrol Officer Qing said, my younger brother is insolent and has offended the Lord. Please punish him, Lord. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, he had to take the blame first. In any case, Su Bei wouldn't really vent his anger on him. Gong Luo's younger brother is actually from the Orchid Pavilion. What a coincidence. Su Bei smiled, easing the stagnant and heavy atmosphere. I'm just lamenting the wonders of fate. I have absolutely no intention of blaming Gong Luo. After this incident, Qing Sun had increased his presence and favorability in front of Su Bei. If Su Bei had listened to Qing Sun's advice back then, he wouldn't be in such a passive state right now. How could Qing Yuan's visit be for the sake of greeting or delivering a letter? He was clearly here to collect a debt. He abruptly exposed Su Bei's crime of forcing his brother to his death. Then, he further exposed the fact that his brother's bloodline had ended because of him. The most extreme was to adopt an heir. Asking Su Bei to adopt his own son to his mortal enemy, and the brother that he had personally forced to his death, was simply disgusting. From beginning to end, Qing Yuan maintained his gentlemanly demeanor. However, every word he said was heart-wrenching. Qing Sun almost didn't recognize this younger brother of his. Although they had been apart for many years and his younger brother had grown from a youth with baby fat to a mature and steady youth, but this change was too big. If not for the fact that Qing Yuan's facial features hadn't changed much, Qing Sun might not have recognized him at first glance. Su Bei dismissed everyone, leaving only Han Yu and Qing Sun behind. He said with a bitter expression, I know I shouldn't have disobeyed the two of you. Now that we've reached this point, is there any way to salvage the situation? He had chosen his lord and had to support him even if he had to kneel. Han Yu didn't say anything. He felt that there was no need to think about salvaging the situation. They should just prepare for war and start at any time. Qing Sun, on the other hand, doted on his lord. Su Bei's previous actions made him sad. Now that they were close and trusted each other, he was overjoyed. He completely forgot about their previous disagreements. Sun, I have a plan. It might work. Qing Sun secretly glanced at Han Yu. When he saw that Han Yu didn't look displeased, he mustered up his courage and said, My lord, why don't you write a secret letter to Lu Shi and tell him the pros and cons? If the two families fight, it will only benefit others. There was no need to say who this others was. The three most powerful feudal lords in Dongqing were Jiang Pengji, Huang Song, and Su Bei. Although Yang Tao still occupied half of Jiangzhou, he had already developed his foundation in Nanxing. It was a joy to expand his territory, so he wasn't included. If Su Bei and Lu Shi fought, Huang Song would definitely be happy to see it happen. He might even secretly stab them in the back. Su Bei said, What Gong Luo means is that I should take the initiative to shake hands with Lanting and make peace. Qing Sun said, Huang Song has disagreements with her, but my lord is indebted to her. Why don't the two families work together to kill Huang Song first? Su Bei frowned and said, I'll try. Han Yu didn't think so. If Jiang Pengji really wanted to kill Huang Song first, she would have done so in Sangzhou. She must have thought it through carefully before choosing to make things difficult for Su Bei. Why would she change her mind just because of a secret letter from Su Bei? How was this different from changing orders all the time? He thought that this urgent letter would take at least half a month to reach Jiang Pengji, but in reality, it only took 10 days. It wasn't that the letter was delivered quickly, but that the messenger met Jiang Pengji halfway. She gathered 100,000 troops and led them to the south. When the messenger saw this battle formation, his scalp went numb. Whose letter is it? Jiang Pengji didn't wear her casual clothes for long. After resting for a while, she put on her armor. There was an exquisite black sword in its scabbard at her waist. The origin of this sword was mysterious. The audience in the streaming room had never seen her pull it out. They were curious at first, but they forgot about it after a while. Qiguan Rang fanned himself lightly and smiled. I believe in Zhao Gong. Feng Jin took over Qiguan Rang's job and managed Chongzhou. He also assisted Sun Wen in managing Beizhou, northern borderline. Before he could be happy for 2 days, he was dragged to the battlefield by Jiang Pengji. Qiguan Rang, I believe in Zhao Gong. Jiang Pengji had a sour expression on her face. Su Bei is Su Bei. Why are you calling me male and female? Qiguan Rang, if he didn't know that his lord had studied in Langyi for 3 years, he would have doubted her education just by hearing these vulgar words. What male and female? These are honorifics. He thought that his lord had learned from Yuanjing and must have a good opinion. He didn't expect her to say such vulgar words. This was his lord. He had to support her even while kneeling. I definitely can't stand people calling me Lanting Duke. At this time, a bunch of comments floated in the streaming room. If I don't call you Lanting Duke, should I call you Lanting Mother? If they weren't separated by dimensions, Jiang Pengji really wanted to beat up this group of idiots. Jiang Pengji opened the secret letter and read 10 lines at a glance. Hua, Su Bei wants to form an alliance with me and share the world, Qiguan Rang said. He's asking for peace and stalling for time. Jiang Pengji picked up her brush and wrote a reply in one breath. Her brush moved like a dragon and snake. The letter was very short. There were only a few words. Chapter 1130. I want 100% of the 9 states and 4 seas. After Jiang Pengji finished writing, she took a step back and admired her handwriting. Before she could rejoice, the group of viewers who were not afraid of being beaten by her started to make trouble again. Lang Yuntian, I'll set up a famous flag for you. I want 99% of the 7 countries. A blue bullet screen was sent, followed by a similar red bullet screen. The viewers from both dimensions looked at each other. It turned out that not only were their dimensions' cultures similar, but even their animations were the same. Mu Xining, streamer, do you want to consider changing your words? The last person who said that died in Qin's dungeon. Xin Yuan Miao Miao, #picknose. I don't think there's a need to change it. Master Han wants 99% of the 7 countries, but Emperor Shi Huang wants 100. If it's really a flag, the streamer should follow Emperor Shi Huang's example and unify the world. I have to say, Master Han, you died a terrible death. The audience loved to use the streaming room as a place to exchange gossip. They could talk about anything. After their complaints, the topic changed from, the streamer set up a flag, to, can the male protagonist of the anime not die? After years of living together, Jiang Pengji had long understood the character of this group of people. She simply treated the bullet screen as air. She did not avoid Qiguan Rang when she wrote, so he could see what was written in the letter. Even though he knew Jiang Pengji's ambition, when he suddenly saw the 8 words, the arrogance and confidence that came rushing at him still slightly surprised him. Lord, an inexplicable emotion welled up, and Qiguan Rang felt something stuck in his throat, making him unable to spit out additional words. What? Are you so shocked that you can't speak? Jiang Pengji laughed. Or do you think I'm too arrogant and arrogant? Guanrang came back to his senses, but he was not in a hurry to explain. Just as Jiang Pengji knew that Guanrang understood her, Guanrang also knew that she understood him and would not easily misunderstand or be angry. I was shocked, but when the shock passed, it made me feel like it was just as I expected. Guanrang frowned deeply and suddenly changed his words. No, it's not enough. My lord's heart seems to be not only focused on the world, but behind it is a broader domain. The world is vast, and the universe is boundless. The so-called 9 provinces and 4 seas may just be a drop in the ocean. Jiang Pengji's eyes were smiling, and her expression was full of deep meaning. If we jump out of this fence, we might really be able to find that place. If there comes a day, I really want to go there again. Guanrang noticed that she was getting more and more mysterious, so he took the initiative to change the topic. One could not blame him for making a fuss over nothing. Since ancient times, how many emperors had been obsessed with longevity and alchemy, yearning for the boundless world of myths and legends? Reality proved that none of them could live forever. Instead, they died earlier than anyone else. Guanrang did not want his lord to lose her mind and foolishly follow the path of her ancestors. Jiang Pengji sensed his intention and laughed involuntarily. She put down the brush in her hand and took out an incense burner to dry the ink. Then, she folded the letter neatly and placed it back into the envelope, summoning the messenger that Su Bei had sent. If Su Bei were to receive this letter, he would fly into a rage. He would be so angry that he wouldn't be able to swallow his food. Jiang Pengji's eyes were filled with mischief. The contents of the letter were the ambition in her heart, but at the same time, it was also a method she used to deliberately provoke Su Bei. The other party eagerly sent a messenger over, trying to turn hostility into friendship. The two families were the strongest allies, conquering the world together. In the end, she gave him a tight slap without saying a word. The feudal lords all cared about their reputations. Jiang Pengji's action of slapping them in the face was really unkind. Those who were narrow-minded would be angered to the point of death by her. Guanrang could not help but laugh. Suddenly, he felt some sympathy for Su Bei. Meeting such an opponent, perhaps they had a feud in their previous lives. As long as my lord likes it. Guanrang's tone was calm, but his eyes carried a hint of undisguised helplessness and amusement. She sent someone to deliver the letter to the messenger. Wei Ci was outside the tent, requesting an audience. Zixiao is even more punctual than the sundial. Guanrang mentally calculated the approximate time. He stood up and smiled. I will take my leave first. He was rather perceptive and tactfully gave the two of them some space. Wei Ci turned to the side and watched Guanrang leave. Their gazes met in the air and they quickly separated. Like a gentle breeze blowing through the green water, after ripples appeared, it quietly returned to a peaceful state. Guanrang was wary of Wei Ci, but he was completely loyal to his lord. For the time being, there was nothing suspicious about him. Zixiao is stalking us again? Jiang Pengji's words had a double meaning. On one hand, she teased him about whether he was jealous of Guanrang. On the other hand, she teased him about the timing of feeding her 3 meals. Wei Ci carried a box of food in his hands. Even though it was tightly covered, one could smell the appetizing aroma of food when they got closer. Wen Zheng is too indulgent towards my lord. I can't be at ease. Wei Ci put down the box of food and brought out a few steaming hot plates of food. The way to keep in good health is to persevere. If you are always hungry and full, your appetite won't be good when you're older. It will affect your lifespan. Wei Ci avoided the main point and dwelled on the trivial, avoiding Jiang Pengji's teasing. Cough. How old am I? You're already thinking about how to keep in good health after I'm 70 or 80? Wei Ci glanced at Jiang Pengji and said mercilessly, my lord is so unrestrained. Even 50 years is in danger. In her previous life, the emperor did not celebrate his 51st birthday in the end. Jiang Pengji felt as if a knife had pierced her heart. She begged for mercy. Alright, alright, alright. I'll eat my meals on time, okay? I'll definitely keep you company until I'm 70 or 80. She was shameless, but Wei Ci was a little embarrassed. He didn't forget to tease her even when he was eating. He was also mentally tired. Little did he know that this was just child's play. There was someone more mentally tired than Wei Ci. Su Bei stabilized the troops on Qin Gong's side while he anxiously waited for Jiang Pengji's reply. Following Han Yu's suggestion, Su Bei also made a backup plan. If Jiang Pengji was willing to accept the suggestion of forming an alliance to conquer the world, that would be the best. Both sides could conveniently bury the hatchet and turn hostility into friendship. If Jiang Pengji was unwilling to accept this suggestion, both sides were destined to fight. Su Bei also had to make adequate preparations for battle. However, he could afford to wait, but Su Fei could not. Su Fei was a direct descendant of the Su family. He was middle-aged, yet he was forced by his cousin to hang himself and leave no descendants. This was already extremely tragic. They couldn't possibly let his corpse rot in the coffin and not be buried, could they? At this point, another problem arose. A filial son had to throw a basin to be buried. Su Fei's sons were all dead. Where would he get a son? Was he really going to let Su Fei adopt his son? Su Bei was 10,000 times unwilling. In the end, he could only choose a compromise. It still disgusted Su Bei to no end. He pinched his nose and welcomed the coffins of Su Fei and the others. With Qin Gong's help, Su Yanshao carefully collected the corpses of her parents and siblings. 2 large and 5 small coffins, 7 coffins. She was the only one left of the large family that had been in constant conflict not long ago. Su Yanshao, who was already thin and dressed in plain hemp clothing, was now so haggard that it was scary. You don't have to worry about me going back. Su Yanshao was Su Fei's only remaining eldest daughter. She definitely could not be absent from the burial of her deceased parents. However, the Su family's land was in Zhe County. If she returned to Zhe County, she would no longer have freedom. Chapter 1131. In ancient times, people matured and became sensible at an early age. At the age of 11, one could already be considered half an adult. Su Yanshao had always been intelligent. At the age of 6, she had been learning how to manage the inner courtyard from her mother. She had seen too much internal strife and intrigue within the inner courtyard. Her mind could not be measured by the standards of an ordinary 11-year-old girl. She knew her situation. Her eldest uncle was the main culprit behind her father's death. Her mother had also been indirectly forced to her death. In short, Su Bei was not only her eldest uncle, but also the enemy who killed her parents. Who would feel at ease letting an enemy take care of them? Su Yanshao had the same worries. Qin Gong sat upright and looked at the young girl in mourning clothes in front of him. His heart was filled with hesitation. Xian Zhao Gong would not dare to mistreat you. If something were to happen, he would do his best to protect you. Su Yanxiao's pale face showed some mockery. Would he do his best to protect me, the enemy who killed my parents? You are now equivalent to his reputation. How would Xian Zhao Gong dare not protect you? Qin Gong said. If he can't even take care of your father's only daughter properly and something happens to you, not to mention the world, even the Su clan elders will not let him off. Su Yanshao hung her head. Her exposed hands were so thin that only bones remained. They were like a pair of shriveled chicken claws. How could they still be as slender and smooth as when she played the zither or painted? She clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into the flesh of her palms, leaving deep red crescent marks. But Qin Fengjing, Su Yanshao held it in for a long while before finally speaking the words in her heart. But I'm afraid. Qin Gong did not interrupt. The scene of that day flashed before Su Yanxiao's eyes. Her thin body trembled uncontrollably. She thought she could endure it, but in the dead of night, her nightmare was filled with the sinister smiles of thugs. They surrounded her and her mother, separating them violently. They tore off their clothes as they beat them. Her mother died with her eyes wide open. The corners of her eyes split open due to the force, and the blood that flowed out dried up. She saw the scene of her mother being humiliated through the gaps of the thugs. The thugs did not let her off. She was more desperate in her dream than in reality. She struggled to wake up, but the thugs treated her even more cruelly. In the second half of the dream, the thugs had all turned into murderous ghosts. Each of them had lost their scalps, revealing their bloody skulls. Dirty blood was dripping from their crotches. One by one, they crawled toward Lin Sanjiu, shouting deadly curses. If not for Su Yanxiao's strong state of mind, she would have been driven mad by the dream. After waking up from the dream, she couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. She even had a frightening thought. Why didn't Qin Gong arrive in time? If they had arrived 2 to 4 hours earlier, all the tragedies could have been prevented. Why didn't he come earlier or later? Why did he have to come after everyone had died? Su Yanxiao's rationality told her that such a thought was too ungrateful, but she couldn't restrain herself. When she regained her senses, she felt that she was like a devil. Her face was even uglier than the concubines in her father's backyard. Qin Gong was silent for a moment, then he said in a low voice, "What is Madame Su afraid of? Can you be honest with me? I've always felt that. I'm afraid that I'm destined to wander from place to place." Su Yanxiao smiled faintly. No matter how well Su Bei treats me, can he treat me better than his own daughter? Although I'm a girl, I know that the world is in chaos. The feudal lords are greedy people. How can they be satisfied with what they have now? If I go to Su Bei's side, how many years can I live in peace? Or a few months? In the end, when the enemy attacks the city, I'll be abducted by thugs? When that time comes, will there be another Qin Fengjing in the world who will arrive in time to save me? Was this the fate of all women in this chaotic world? As a woman, should she accept such a helpless fate? She had no choice but to compromise and break her proud and unyielding character in order to survive in this chaotic world. Finally, Su Yanxiao hesitated, but still asked him, "Why did you arrive late that day?" Qin Gong lowered his head and told her the truth. He didn't rush over that day to save Su Yanxiao. He came for Su Fei's corpse. If not for heaven's eyes, Su Yanxiao would have been there. He didn't know when he would have found her. "I'm asking." Su Yanxiao took a deep breath and enunciated each word clearly. "Why did the army arrive at Shanqing so late?" Qin Gong's eyes revealed a trace of confusion. "I've already said it, he never thought of suspecting Jiang Pingji, much less Su Fei. But Su Yanxiao was different. I want to know why Lu Shi would be so generous to borrow 10,000 troops. Why did he borrow 10,000 troops and arrive at such a coincidental time? If there were too many coincidences, it would inevitably arouse suspicion. 10,000 troops were like cabbages. How could he borrow them just like that? Qin Gong was her father's most loyal official. Why would he switch sides at the last minute? Why did the 10,000 troops rush to Shanqing at such a good time? Su Yanxiao had been busy keeping vigil for her deceased parents. The temporary mourning hall was empty and quiet. She couldn't help but think too much. These doubts were like her nightmares, strangling her in a death grip. Qin Gong didn't hide anything and told her in detail what he knew. In the end, he added dejectedly, "I'm sorry. I'm ashamed to have lived up to your trust and nurturing." Su Yanxiao listened and didn't speak for a long time. "Lady Su, please be at ease for a while. Stay in Jia County and quietly wait for good news." Qin Gong seemed a little shy. He looked away and said in a low voice, looking at the situation of the world, "My lord and Duke Xingzhao will definitely fight. On the day the army defeats the enemy, I will take you away." Su Yanxiao didn't reply. Qin Gong kept vigil with her for a while, then got up to train the troops and patrol. Because he had to prevent Su Bei from sending troops to attack, he had been very busy. But Qin Gong couldn't stop worrying about Su Yanxiao. In order to take care of both, he could only shorten his sleep and rest time. Just as he left the morning hall, he found Yang Si standing outside. Military advisor Yang, what are you? Tomorrow is the deadline. Lady Su has to carry the remains of your lord and the others back. Yang Si smiled bitterly. I've admired your lord for a long time, but I can't send your soul off. Since I'm free, I wanted to come over and offer some incense to your lord to express my sincerity. Qin Gong was grateful. His favorable impression of Yang Si climbed to a whole new level. Unbeknownst to him, such kind words were nothing more than pleasantries for a strategist. As soon as Qin Gong left, Yang Si entered the morning hall. The temporarily arranged morning hall was very simple and crude. The air inside was a little stuffy, and it was a little uncomfortable to stay for too long. Yang Si said a few words of comfort to Su Yanxiao. When he was offering incense, Su Yanxiao asked him, "How long have you been listening outside?" Yang Si said, "Quite a long time." Su Yanxiao frowned. "Don't you know that you shouldn't listen to indecent things?" Yang Si said, "Lady Su, please take pity on Colonel Qin." Yang Si said, "Lady Su, please pity Colonel Qin." "What do you mean by that?" Su Yanxiao was a little afraid of men. When she saw Yang Si turn to look at her, she subconsciously shrank back a step. "Lady Su, do you know why my lord lent 10,000 troops to Colonel Qin? Did Colonel Qin join the lord's camp?" Yang Si suddenly smiled faintly and said to Su Fei's coffin, "Because your lord used Colonel Qin as a bargaining chip to exchange for these 10,000 troops. The journey from Wanzhou to Hu County is so long that even a horse wouldn't be able to make it in time. If he could make it in time that day, the entire army would be exhausted." Su Yanxiao's eyes widened in shock. She was so frightened that she took a step back. "Father actually." Chapter 1132. No matter how smart Su Yanxiao was, she was still young. How could she be Yang Si's opponent? With just a few words, Yang Si had already grasped Su Yanxiao's weakness and completely controlled the right to speak. "This matter, does he know?" Su Yanxiao recalled what she had just said and thought. For a moment, she was ashamed and didn't know what to do. Naturally, Commandant Qin doesn't know. Yang Si smiled and said, "Lady Su, why don't you put yourself in his shoes and think about it? If you were Ling Wengong, would you let Commandant Qin know how he borrowed these 10,000 soldiers? According to Colonel Qin's temperament, if Ling Wengong hadn't schemed against him in secret, how could he have switched sides? Colonel Qin also said that he wished he could imitate his father and brothers and fight to the last drop of blood for his former master, Ling Wengong. The more loyal Qin Gong was, the more sinister Su Fei's schemes were. Whether it was Qin Gong or the Qin Consortium, they didn't owe Su Fei or the Su Consortium anything. His father and brothers had all died in battle, and Qin Gong was unknowingly sold off by Su Fei for a high price in exchange for 10,000 reinforcements. If Su Fei hadn't gone crazy and attacked first, Su Fei's wishful thinking would have succeeded long ago. He would have even brought his entire family to safety. Now that he had fallen to such a state, he couldn't blame anyone. He could only blame himself for not having enough luck even though he had calculated everything. Yang Si had a sense of propriety. "Lieutenant Qin has been extremely benevolent to Lady Su, don't you think so?" Su Yanxiao lowered her eyes in disappointment. She looked at the coffins in the morning hall with a blank expression. After a long while, Su Yanxiao asked Yang Si softly, "Will Sir tell him about this? I'm not a talkative person. Why would I publicize this matter?" Yang Si said, "However, there's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world. If Commandant Qin found out from somewhere, or if he figured it out himself, who knew? However, by that time, Colonel Qin would have already accepted reality and wouldn't have given up on himself just because his old master had abandoned him. My master, Lu Shi, is very open-minded. Colonel Qin is talented and she will cherish you." Su Yanxiao heard a trace of resentment and contempt from Yang Si's words. Qin Gong was talented and loyal, which master wouldn't like him? However, Su Fei had lied to Qin Gong and tricked him into going to Wanzhou, using him as a bargaining chip in exchange for 10,000 reinforcements. How could this be called cherishing? Su Yanxiao smiled bitterly and said hesitantly, "Thank you, sir." Yang Xi's words perfectly dispelled Su Yanxiao's suspicions. What right did she have to doubt Qin Gong? It was not Qin Gong's own will to switch sides. For the sake of Su Fei's branch, he had lost almost everything and everyone he could. Poor Qin Gong, he was still kept in the dark, and was still brooding over the fact that he was late. Thinking of this, Su Yanxiao could not help but cover her face, as if doing so could lessen the shame in her heart. She didn't notice when Yang Xi left. When she came back to her senses, night had fallen. The cold air blew in through the gap of the curtain, making the morning hall a little more gloomy and terrifying. Su Yanxiao raised her hand and patted her cheeks. She calmed her mind and devoutly burned incense and recited scriptures for her deceased mother. Another half an hour passed. "Lady Su." Was this Qin Gong's voice? A trace of panic flashed through Su Yanxiao's heart. She faintly did not know how to face Qin Gong's shame. This shame was not only because of Su Fei's scheme against Qin Gong, but also because she had spoken without thinking and unintentionally hurt Qin Gong. "Lady Su." Qin Gong called out again. His voice was a little louder than before, sounding a little anxious. "Fengjing, come in." Su Yanxiao then remembered that because of her previous encounter, she was afraid of men like a tiger. The soldier who brought her food for the first time was seen as a scourge by her. After that, the person who brought her food became Qin Gong. Qin Gong got permission and opened the curtain to come in. He was carrying a food box in his other hand. Su Yanxiao glanced at the sky outside and asked casually, "It's so late?" Qin Gong said rather shamefully, "There were many military matters today, so I wasted some time. As a result, the food was a little late." "That's not what I meant." Su Yanxiao lowered her head. Originally, she was just surprised that time passed too quickly. After hearing Qin Gong's words, it seemed like she was complaining that he delivered the food too late. Military matters are more important. How can I ignore official business for personal reasons? This is just a small matter. It's fine to eat later. Although it was delivered late, the food was steaming hot. There were 4 vegetarian dishes and a bowl of mushroom and egg soup. Su Yanxiao did not have much appetite. When she inadvertently saw Qin Gong's concerned gaze, she was startled and tried to finish all the food. "Fengjing." Qin Gong saw that Su Yanxiao had something to say. As he tidied up the food and cutlery, he gestured for her to speak with his eyes. Su Yanxiao asked softly, "Bai Ri, you said that you would come and pick me up after defeating the enemy. Is that true?" Qin Gong was shocked at first, then he said solemnly, "Of course it's true. Even if I have to risk my life, I will protect Lady Su." When Su Yanxiao heard this, she did not feel good. "Your lord is no longer my father. You have to be more careful with your words and actions," she said. "Fengjing also has to think for yourself." Qin Gong knew that she was concerned about him. He could not help but feel happy. He said, "Even if Lady Su does not say it, I know what to do. My lord is not a narrow-minded person. She will not blame me for this. Lord Wen treated me well. Although my soul has passed away, I still owe him a favor. How can I turn my back on him and disregard the safety of my old lord's descendants? As long as I do not cross her bottom line, my lord will allow it." If the old lord had just died and he flattered the new lord, or even hit the old lord's descendants when they were down, this kind of person would be bitterly disappointed. Su Yanxiao saw that Qin Gong was not affected by her previous words and sighed in relief. With Qin Gong's company, she was not as fearful of the future. On the morning of the second day, the sky had just brightened when the sound of horse hooves came from outside the camp. This was sent by Su Pei to receive the corpses of Su Yanxiao and Su Fei. Su Yanxiao used clean water to wash her face. She was still dressed in mourning clothes. She lifted her hands and hugged the memorial tablets of her deceased parents. In order to show her sincerity, Su Pei even sent an old official to receive her. "Lady Su, please." The old official was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He wore wide sleeves and a wide belt. He had an elegant demeanor and a clean beard on his face. He had the air of an immortal. Su Yanxiao looked at him expressionlessly. She then shifted her gaze to the carriage. "No, as a daughter, I'm grateful for the kindness of my deceased father and mother. Unfortunately, they have passed away. An unfilial daughter can't do much for them, but I can't skip this journey." She looked at the old official and said, "Please show me filial piety first." Old official Su Pei's expression froze. He tried to dissuade her. "Lady Su, my daughter has already made up her mind. Please fulfill my filial piety." Su Yanxiao wanted to walk step by step to Mountain Barbican City. Chapter 1133. Minister Su Pei revealed a displeased expression, but he couldn't force Su Yanxiao either. If he allowed Su Yanxiao to walk to Mountain Barbican, what would the world say? Not only did he force her entire family to die, he even wanted to mistreat his only daughter. If he didn't allow it, the rumors in the outside world would be even worse. Minister Su Pei scrutinized Su Yanxiao's face. Seeing her resolute gaze, he knew that there was no room for discussion. "It's time. Let's go." Su Yanxiao walked at the front of the procession. She held Su Fei's and her mother's tokens in each hand. Her mourning clothes were very loose, and she wore a long and wide white cloth on her head, making her look even more frail. Due to the rules of mourning, she only wore coarse stockings and straw sandals. The road was uneven, and there were gravel everywhere. It had rained last night, so many places were filled with puddles and mud. It was easy to imagine how much suffering Su Yanxiao would have to endure if she insisted on walking. Minister Su Pei saw that she wouldn't come to her senses. He swung his sleeves angrily and spoke with a gloomy expression. "Rise." Following the spirit guide's shout, the 7 coffins were lifted one by one. According to the order of seniority, Su Fei's coffin was placed at the front, followed closely by the official wife's coffin. The remaining 5 coffins were arranged according to the seniority of the concubine sons, followed by the 2 concubine daughters. White banners hung high, paper money fluttered in the wind, and the spirit guiding bell rang along the way. Qin Gong rode to a high vantage point and watched the procession until Su Yanxiao's silhouette became a white dot in his vision. "Captain Qin, are you worried about the lady's safety?" Seeing him return, Yang Si asked with a smile with a worried expression on his face. Qin Gong nodded honestly. "I am indeed a little worried." To Su Yanxiao, Su Pei was no longer her uncle. He was the culprit who had forced her father to his death and indirectly caused her mother's death. How could Qin Gong be at ease letting the 11-year-old Su Pei go alone into an environment filled with evil intentions? Yang Si said, "Lady Su is still young, but she has a sharp mind. Compared to her, Captain Qin is the more worrying one." Qin Gong's expression froze, and his heart began to pound. To a certain extent, Yang Si represented the new master, Lu Shi. If he was dissatisfied, the new master would not have a good time either. Qin Gong did not know what he had done to annoy Yang Si. He cupped his hands nervously. "I'm young and immature. Please give me some pointers." Yang Si saw that his face was pale and he looked frightened. The little bit of bad taste in his heart was greatly satisfied. He helped Qin Gong up. "Colonel Qin, what are you doing?" "I only had a sudden feeling just now, I didn't mean anything else." But when he suddenly said that, it was quite scary. Qin Gong's heart was pounding. He couldn't help but wonder if his actions in recent days had violated Yang Si's taboo. Yang Si smiled and narrowed his eyes. His attitude toward Qin Gong was no different than usual, and it made Qin Gong feel much more at ease. The procession set off in the morning and only arrived at the mountain-earned city when the golden crow set in the west and the sky darkened. The current owner of Mountain Urn City was Su Bei. Su Yanxiao slowly walked to the bottom of the city, her eyes coldly looking at the slightly charred city gate. Her mind replayed the scene of the fire she had seen that day when she was fleeing. The charred marks told of the bitter battle that night. Su Bei had waited for an entire day in vain. He had even finished his dinner when he received news of Su Yanxiao's arrival. He suppressed the anger in his heart and once again put on a carefully prepared expression. Dressed in plain white clothes, he sincerely attended Su Fei's funeral. To disgust Su Fei, he had even prepared an incomparably flowery funeral oration. Su Bei cried for a long time, and the officials under the tent also had red eyes. Only Su Yanxiao remained unmoved. It was as if she was watching a monkey show. "Uncle, please restrain your grief and accept fate. Don't cry, otherwise father won't be able to rest in peace." Su Yanxiao remained expressionless. She said in a hoarse voice, "You and father were deeply in love, but due to the circumstances, you had no choice but to fight among yourselves. After father was defeated, he hung himself in despair. Mother wanted to follow him through life and death, so she passed away first. This is all fate. Uncle, you don't have to be too sad." Su Bei said, "I didn't kill Boren, but Boren died because of me. As for the funeral oration, I can't escape blame." As he finished speaking, he burst into tears again. Su Bei played the role of an uncle who grieved over his niece, agreeing to Su Yanxiao's every request. Unbeknownst to him, Su Yanxiao had dug a pit for him at this time. She accompanied Su Bei into the city with a normal expression. From time to time, she would comfort Su Bei and cooperate with his performance. Until, the blood on the ground, previously, their vision had been dim. Now that they had arrived at the brightly lit meeting hall, they realized that there were many faint bloody footprints on the ground. Looking at them, they saw that Su Yanxiao was wearing a pair of tattered straw sandals. Her stockings were covered in blood and mud. Everyone felt pain just by looking at it, but this person looked as if nothing had happened. Su Bei's heart skipped a beat. Su Yanxiao hung her head in shame. "Uncle, you are immersed in your pain and have no heart to care about the outside world. Niece also doesn't want to trouble uncle with such a small matter." The candlelight burned brightly. Su Bei felt that he couldn't put down his pride. If he really cared about his niece, how could he not know that she had walked so far barefoot and that her soles were damaged? To put it bluntly, it was just a show. If Su Yanxiao made him feel disgusted, then Zhang Pengji's letter made him so angry that he exploded on the spot. A few days after Su Fei's burial, Su Bei finally received the reply that he had been longing for. Su Bei took the secret letter from the messenger's hands and opened it to read. Beside him, Han Yu and Qing Sun looked at each other. The latter's eyes were filled with doubt, while the former's expression was grave. The time taken for the messenger to make a round trip was too short. Unless the messenger saw Jiang Pengji on the way. Han Yu frowned deeply. He could already foresee the outcome. As expected, Su Bei's anger was much stronger than expected. He slammed his palm on the table, so angry that his shoulders were trembling. Outrageous. Lu Shi's arrogance knows no bounds. Su Bei was so angry that he threw the letter away and flipped the table over. Han Yu picked up the letter and glanced at the contents from the corner of his eyes. "I want 100% of the 9 prefectures and 4 seas." Merely 8 words, but they expressed her ambition, arrogance, and unruliness. This was not only her goal, but also her declaration of war against Su Bei. Su Bei's territory was within the borders of the 9 prefectures and 4 seas. She wanted 100%, while Su Bei could only ask for 0%. Su Bei wrote a letter to ask for peace, but she replied with such a letter. It was like a slap in the face. She wants 100% of the 9 prefectures and 4 seas? Since ancient times, how many people have dared to say such words? Isn't she afraid that the wind will cut her tongue? Su Bei's anger did not subside. Qing Sun also came over to read the contents of the letter. He frowned and said, "She's just playing to the gallery." Even the ancestors of the previous dynasty would not dare to be so arrogant. Su Bei wanted to share the cake with her, but she wanted to eat the whole cake in one bite. Wasn't she afraid of choking? Han Yu did not say anything. Chapter 1134. Wenbin didn't say anything just now. Do you have other thoughts? Han Yu's eyebrows hadn't relaxed since he left the tent. There were faint wrinkles between his eyebrows. Gong Luo, how do you think our lord is compared to the north borderline? Han Yu filtered the words in his mind over and over again before he asked cautiously. Ching Sun was stunned at first, then he thought of something and his expression turned ugly. Jianghu had even annihilated the northern borderline. No matter how difficult it was to conquer Su Bei, could it be more difficult than the northern borderline? Is Wenbin trying to say that lord is inferior to Lu Shi? Ching Sun was a master complex. He couldn't stand others saying that his master was not as good as others, even if it was Han Yu who said it. Han Yu shook his head. If he personally admitted that Lu Shi was inferior to his lord, wouldn't Su Bei flip the heavens if he heard this? That's not what I meant, Han Yu explained. Underestimating the enemy is the biggest trouble in using troops. Just like the scene just now, disregarding whether I want 100% of the 9 prefectures and 4 seas, was arrogant or not, in terms of qualifications, Jianghu was more qualified than Su Bei. Those who were stronger than her had the right to say that she was arrogant, but those who were weaker than her should pay full attention instead of looking down on the enemy. Ching Sun said, Wenbin is worrying too much. The lord can't be compared to the northern borderline at all. Lu Shi may have defeated the northern borderline, but he may not be able to defeat his lord. The northern borderline is a tribe that has yet to undergo barbarism. Although they have brute force, they lack intelligence. Coupled with Lu Shi's cunning, it's not surprising that he was lucky enough to win. Han Yu was a little uncomfortable, but he didn't show it. Ching Sun's opinion of Jianghu was not ordinary. She came from an aristocratic family but mingled with the commoners. He heard that she had all kinds of people under her, the sons of prostitutes, mixed bloods, criminals. Dare he ask, did she have any decent people under her? The only one who caught her eye was Feng Jin. He was talented and virtuous, and his family background and bloodline were both first class. Oh, he had forgotten that there was still his younger brother. Ching Sun could not help but frown at the thought. Why did father allow Qing Yuan to assist Lu Shi? Why didn't he stop him? Ching Sun continued, furthermore, the northern lands lack education. Most of the officials in her tent were rough people, all of them were lowly men of humble birth. The descendants of aristocratic families disdained to be associated with them. Helping the world is an important matter. How can a true hero work with a lowly and immoral person? Ching Sun was a typical supporter of the aristocratic families. He was proud of his bloodline and birth, and disdained the commoners and commoners. The environment he had been living in since he was young had shaped this kind of character. His prejudice towards family status had long been deeply rooted, and it was difficult to remove it. Not only Ching Sun, but many other scions also had the same idea. Although there were no written rules to divide people into different classes, in the current era where the aristocratic families were as solid as a fortress, the invisible social classes had already taken shape, and there was an insurmountable gap between them. Han Yu said, Wenbin's words are biased. If Han Yu wasn't Master Yuanjing's apprentice, but a simple descendant of an aristocratic family, he would agree with Ching Sun. People of the same class were highly similar in terms of thought form and other aspects. However, the teacher Han Yu admired was Master Yuanjing. Master Yuanjing was born in a poor family, but he was recognized by many aristocratic families. Who dared to question his attainments and qualifications as a teacher? Ching Sun saw that Han Yu was a little angry, and then he remembered about Master Yuanjing. What was the difference between criticizing the poor and commoners in front of Han Yu and scolding his father in front of Han Yu? Although Lu Shi is a woman, she is also a feudal lord who ruled over several states. She has 2 horse farms in her territory. I'm afraid that it will be difficult for the lord to stop her alone, Han Yu continued. The most important thing now is to dispatch the 3 armies and prepare for war. The confrontation between two armies did not depend on who had a better family background and who would get more points. In troubled times, not to mention the aristocratic families, even if a knife was placed on their necks, they would still be beheaded. Su Fei was born in the Su family of Zhe County. If there was a ranking list of his family background, this guy could definitely climb to the top 50 in Dongqing. But what happened? Did his noble family save his life? Not only was he forced to die, but his wife and concubines were also raped by the thugs in front of his corpse. Only one of his children was left. Instead of talking about family background, it was better to say that the winner takes all. The winner was crowned king, and the loser's corpse was left in the wilderness. Ching Sun also took the opportunity to say, well, Wenbin is right. They ended the conversation in a hurry. After the two of them separated, Han Yu looked at Ching Sun's back with a complicated expression. He was very sure of Ching Sun's talent and rationality, but his stubbornness about his family background gave him a headache. His lord, Su Pei, had many talented people under his command. They were loyal, intelligent, and courageous. Ever since the establishment of the team, Su Pei had never worried about the lack of talent. On the other hand, if it weren't for the participation of a few experts in the education field and the joint efforts of the Golden Scale Court to become a talent selection market, would she have enough people under her command? Not enough at all. Even now, it was a little hard to make ends meet, let alone in the past. With such a huge difference in the team, how could Jiang Pengji still firmly suppress Su Pei? It wasn't that Han Yu didn't understand, but he tried to persuade Su Pei indirectly, but Su Pei still didn't change. What else could he do? Su Pei valued the aristocratic families and looked down on the talented commoners, making them sit on the bench every day. Even the warmest of hearts would freeze. Thinking of this, Han Yu felt a little irritated for no reason. He simply found something for himself to do, such as inspecting the training of the soldiers in the military camp. As soon as he arrived at the drill ground, he heard a thunderous command. The soldiers followed the command and waved their spears, advancing and retreating in a clean and efficient manner. Captain Xie, Han Yu saw Xie Zhe, who was training the soldiers on the drill ground. Xie Zhe was a man with sword-like eyebrows, bright eyes, and eyes as dark as ink. He was heroic and handsome. At this moment, he was bare-chested, revealing his muscular upper body. He was personally teaching the soldiers how to use the spear to defend against the enemy. Han. Military Counselor Han, Xie Zhe withdrew his spear and was about to step forward when a gust of cold wind suddenly blew past him, making him feel a little chilly. He was slightly embarrassed and grabbed a long robe that was piled up at the side, hastily putting it on to cover his muscles. Why are you here, Military Counselor? Han Yu said, there will be big movements in the next few days. I'm thinking of countermeasures, so I dropped by to see how your training is going. Xie Zhe said, I see. Han Yu looked at the young man in front of him. He was 2 years younger than him, but he was a head taller than him. No wonder he was an elite from the Xies. Han Yu smiled and squinted his eyes, watching Xie Zhe train the soldiers. Because of the presence of the military counselor, Xie Zhe, who was already strict, became even stricter, causing the soldiers to complain secretly. When the day's training was over, many of them were too tired to get up. Why are all of you so tired? We've made a fool of ourselves in front of the military counselor. Continue to lie down, 2 more rounds of training. Xie Zhe was angry and amused at the same time. A few of the more cunning adjutants smiled and begged for mercy. The general is mighty. We can't stand it anymore. We'll get up now, we'll get up now. Xie Zhe picked up the armor that was scattered on the side and held the helmet in his other hand. He invited Han Yu, military counselor, you haven't had dinner yet, right? Why don't you stay for a meal? Chapter 1135. Whether it was a prosperous or chaotic world, talents were the backbone of a force's development. Jiang Pengji's strategists and generals all relied on swindling and swindling. Huang Song relied on his relatives from the Yuan family and Feng Zhu's network of connections. Su Bei's side was no exception. Compared to the disparity in the talent structure of the former two, the latter's source of talent was more singular. Apart from a small number of vassals of the Su family, the rest were all famous scholars of various regions. Very few of them were from poor families. Even if they did, they would most likely end up sitting on the bench. Regardless of whether one was a civil official or a military general, if they wanted to be valued by Su Bei, they needed both talent and family background. On this point, apart from a few, most people, including Su Bei himself, felt that there was nothing wrong with it. Don't be fooled by the fact that Su Bei valued the aristocratic families and despised the poor. His reputation with the outside world was much better than Jianghu's. In order to build up his reputation, he often visited famous scholars from all over the world. He was courteous and thirsty for talent. Now that he had made a name for himself and everyone was praising him, the rest would be easy. Like a blooming flower, the fragrance it emitted attracted countless bees seeking nectar. Only when famous people pledged their allegiance would they take the initiative to visit. After a round of selections, Su Bei's team of civil officials had basically taken shape. Su Bei was a picky person and had a slight obsessive-compulsive disorder. Most of the civil officials were of noble birth, but not all of the military generals were boorish men, right? Hence, Su Bei's team of generals was also an all-star lineup. It was incomparably luxurious. Take Xie Zhe, for example. He was born in the Xie clan, and in terms of family background, he was able to suppress all the military officials and strategists. He was almost comparable to his lord, Su Bei. If this had happened more than 20 years ago, during the golden age of the Gongning Xie family, even Su Bei would have been inferior to him. No matter how one looked at it, Su Bei was someone who knew how to run a business. Of course, knowing how to run a business did not mean success. It wasn't impossible to play the worst possible scenario with the best cards in hand. Counselor, are you not going to eat? Is it because the food in the camp is too coarse? Xie Zhe chewed the vegetables and ate the rice, finishing the 2 big bowls in no time. His movements were neat and tidy, and the plates were even cleaner than his face. He only put down his chopsticks after he was 80% full. Seeing that Han Yu was preoccupied and had no appetite, she couldn't help but show her concern. Han Yu came back to his senses and looked embarrassed. No, I was worried about something else. I was too engrossed in my thoughts. He picked up his chopsticks and ate 2 mouthfuls. The coarse rice grains were still a little raw, and the cold and hard-dried vegetables made him a little uncomfortable. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that Xie Zhe's table was empty except for a bowl of clear soup with egg drops floating on it. Both of them had the same food. Han Yu tasted nothing, while Xie Zhe ate happily. Commandant Xie's eccentricity makes me feel ashamed. Han Yu almost forced himself to finish the food. The more he did so, the more he appreciated Xie Zhe. Xie Zhe wasn't stupid either. He understood immediately. He smiled and said, I'm used to it. The food in the army is not bad. Xie Zhe was of noble birth, but the Xie family was a family of martial arts. Naturally, it was different from other families. In an environment where Confucianism was revered, most of the Xie family's disciples were military strategists, and the books they studied were mostly related to military strategies. Now that the world was in chaos, Xie Zhe had been recommended to Su Pei's camp by a good friend. At such a young age, he was already the #1 general under Su Pei's command. Why were you worried just now, military advisor? Xie Zhe asked. If you don't mind, military advisor can tell me, and we can discuss it together. This matter has something to do with Commandant Xie, Han Yu said. Lu Shi has led his troops to the south and is heading straight for Zhe County, Hu County, and other places. A war is imminent, and it's almost unavoidable. In my opinion, it will be difficult for the Lord to resist Lu Shi's edge with just her forces. The people under the Lord's command also look down on Lu Shi. With such a mentality, I'm afraid they will suffer a great loss. Selfishly, perhaps they can find an alliance and use it to restrain Lu Shi. Jianghu used alliances to break the deadlock. Naturally, Han Yu could use the same method to make her suffer. 2 against 1 was better than 1 against 1. Xia Zhe pondered for a while and asked, military advisor, do you want to form an alliance with Huang Song? The feudal lords around Su Pei were either incompetent or had a grudge against him. Those who were incompetent were mostly swallowed up by Su Pei. Those who had a grudge against him, such as Yang Tao, who had half of Jianghu eaten up, were lucky that Su Pei didn't pick up his axe and beat him up. How could he want to form an alliance to fight Jiang Pengji? The only forces that were further away were Huang Song and the Nie family of Zhongzhou. The Nie family was temporarily out of the game and had to clean up their internal affairs. They couldn't join in for the time being. Huang Song was the only one left. Speaking of which, Huang Song had wanted to beat Jiang Pengji up for a long time. Han Yu nodded and said, although the grudge between Lu Shi and Huang Song in Sangzhou and Qinzhou was successfully resolved, the conflict still exists. If it wasn't for the overall situation, the two of them would definitely fight. If something were to happen to the lord, the next feudal lord to be dealt with would certainly be Huang Song. Most of the strategists under his command are clear-headed. They wouldn't be unaware of the severity of the situation. Huang Song and the lord are already in a mutually dependent relationship. After Jiang Pengji got rid of Su Pei, the next one would be Huang Song. If Huang Song helped Su Pei fight Jiang Pengji now, it would be 2 against 1. The chances of winning were high. If she waited until she dealt with Su Pei, Huang Song would be helpless. Out of consideration for their own interests, the possibility of Su Pei and Huang Song forming an alliance was not low. Xia Zhe said, logically speaking, it's feasible. However, Huang Song is a treacherous person. He might not agree. To him, it's better to learn from the fishermen and wait until the Lord and Lu Shi are evenly matched. Then, he'll look for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. In that case, it would be more worthwhile to severely injure 2 opponents at once. Han Yu knitted his brows with a heavy heart. Xia Zhe smiled and said, the military counselor is very afraid of Lu Shi. The civil and military officials under Su Pei looked down on Jiang Pengji's grassroots team, but Han Yu's style was different from the others. I had some interactions with Lu Shi when I was young. That person can't be judged by common sense. At this point, Han Yu paused and didn't continue. No matter how far away Jiang Pengji was, whenever Han Yu thought of her, he would think of the foot-washing water that flowed upstream. F***CK. F***CK. One day, he would feed her back. Xia Zhe echoed, sigh, underestimating the enemy in battle is a big taboo. The military counselor's worries aren't without reason. Jiang Pengji knew nothing about this. Even if she knew, she wouldn't be afraid. War wasn't a turn-based game where one's family background was the highest. Whichever family had a higher score would win. If that was the case, would there still be a day for the poor in this world? Jiang Pengji was in a meeting. Know yourself and know your enemy to win 100 battles. It was necessary to do homework before going to war. In order to boost morale, everyone liked to analyze the enemy while trampling them to the ground. Strategically, they despised the enemy. Tactically, they valued the enemy. The analysis started with Su Pei. Then, they picked out the more famous civil and military officials. Needless to say, Han Yu was an old acquaintance. Wei Ci was his classmate. He even knew how old Wei Ci was, let alone the others. Qing Sun, who had been active in the public eye recently, was Qing Yuan's elder brother. It wasn't difficult to find him either. As for the other famous scholars of virtue and prestige, their deeds before Su Bei became an official were also investigated. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.